Hello guys, welcome to Phonic What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was transported to Wano and fell in love with Yamato, a fellow child of a great leader. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Crimson Winds. A Tale of Two Worlds ## Chapter 1. The Stranger and the Oni. The air split with a sound like tearing fabric. Naruto Uzumaki twisted mid-leap, his body illuminated by the fading glow of Kurama's chakra as the dimensional jutsu before him began to collapse. What had started as a routine mission to capture a rogue Otsutsuki scout had devolved into something far more dangerous. The enemy revealed an ability none of them had prepared for. Kakashi-sensei. It's destabilizing, Naruto shouted, watching the swirling vortex expand beyond the containment barrier Yamato Taiko had created. Kakashi's voice crackled through his wireless communicator. Fall back. Everyone retreat to safe distance. But Naruto couldn't retreat, not yet. The vortex was growing larger by the second, and below it, caught in its gravitational pull, was a young academy student who'd wandered too close to the battle zone. The boy clawed desperately at the ground, fingers leaving deep furrows in earth as he was dragged toward the dimensional tier. Damn it! Naruto pushed forward, ignoring the warnings blaring in his earpiece. The golden cloak of the Nine Tails flared brighter as he extended a chakra arm toward the struggling child. Got you. His energy wrapped around the boy's waist, pulling him away from the vortex's grasp. With a powerful heave, he flung the child toward Sakura's waiting arms. The moment of distraction cost him. The vortex pulsed, and something struck Naruto from behind. A final attack from the Otsutsuki scout, who had been caught in the collapsing dimensional gate. Naruto felt the barrier of his chakra cloak fracture, and then he was falling, being pulled inexorably into the swirling void. Sakura's voice reached him, frantic and fading. Naruto. He twisted in the air, reaching toward his friend's distant figures, but the vortex consumed him. Colors and sensations flooded his consciousness, blinding light, crushing darkness, searing heat, bitter cold, all in rapid succession. Naruto felt his body being stretched and compressed, twisted and pulled. Pain lanced through every cell. The Nine Tails roared within him, chakra flaring defensively, but even Kurama's power couldn't stabilize him in this between space. Naruto felt consciousness slipping away as reality itself seemed to bend around him. His last thought before darkness claimed him was a simple prayer: let me survive this. I'm not finished yet. The first sensation Naruto registered was pain, a deep, bone-aching throb that pulsed through his entire body. The second was the smell of tea and cherry blossoms carried on a cool breeze. Slowly, unwillingly, he opened his eyes. An unfamiliar sky stretched above him, painted in the soft pinks and oranges of early dawn. Not the sky over Konoha, certainly. This one felt different somehow. The air tasted different too, heavier with moisture and tinged with the scent of the sea. Naruto groaned, pushing himself up on unsteady arms. He'd landed in what appeared to be a forested area, having carved a small crater in the soft earth with his impact. Trees surrounded him, but not the massive ones of the Land of Fire. These were different, flowering cherry trees mixed with sturdy pines, arranged with an aesthetic intention that spoke of careful cultivation rather than wild growth. Where the hell am I? He muttered, taking inventory of his condition. His chakra reserves were dangerously low, barely enough to sustain basic functions. The Nine Tails was silent within him, which was concerning. Kurama usually had plenty to say when Naruto found himself in trouble. Standing on shaky legs, Naruto dusted off his tattered orange and black jumpsuit and oriented himself toward what looked like thinner forest coverage. Walking might help him regain his bearings. And he needed to find civilization if he had any hope of figuring out where the dimensional rift had deposited him. The forest gave way to a well-maintained path that wound down a gentle hillside. In the distance, Naruto could make out what appeared to be a small village, traditional buildings with curved roofs nestled together near a river. Something about the architecture struck him as familiar, reminiscent of historical districts he'd seen during missions to distant parts of the Land of Fire, but with subtle differences he couldn't quite place. As he approached the village outskirts, Naruto became aware of something else that set his ninja senses on alert, the atmosphere of fear. The village was quiet in a way that spoke not of peace but of tension. Few people moved in the streets, and those who did walked quickly, heads bowed, eyes darting nervously. Definitely not in the leaf anymore, he muttered, adjusting his forehead protector out of habit. He'd need information, but approaching villagers who were already on edge might not be the best strategy. A commotion from the village center drew his attention. Raised voices, the sound of something breaking, then a child's frightened cry. Naruto's body moved before his mind could catch up, years of training pushing him toward the source of distress despite his weakened state. He rounded a corner to find a scene that made his blood boil. 3 men in strange, Oni-themed armor were confronting an elderly shopkeeper. One had upended a cart of vegetables, while another held a weeping child, likely the shopkeeper's grandchild, by the arm. The tribute was short again. Old man, the largest of the 3, snarled, his face partially hidden behind a grotesque mask. The great Kaido's patience grows thin. Please, the old man pleaded, bowing so deeply his forehead nearly touched the ground. The harvest was poor this season. I've given everything I can spare. The man holding the child tightened his grip, making the young boy cry out in pain. Perhaps we should take something else of value then. That was enough. Chakra depleted or not, Naruto couldn't stand by. Hey, he called out, stepping into the square. Why don't you pick on someone your own size? The 3 armored men turned toward him, momentarily surprised by the intrusion. Their surprise quickly morphed into amusement when they took in his tattered appearance. What's this? Some foreigner thinking he's a hero. The leader laughed, a harsh sound behind his mask. You've wandered into the wrong country, boy. And you've made the wrong choice harassing innocent people. Naruto replied, sizing them up. They were larger than average men, well armed with what appeared to be traditional weapons, a kanabo, a pair of sai, and a curved sword that resembled a katana. No visible signs of chakra use, which was odd, but Naruto couldn't afford to underestimate them. Do you have any idea who we are? The one with the kanabo stepped forward. We're the headliners of the Beast Pirates. We speak with Kaido's authority in Wano. Beast Pirates, Kaido, Wano. None of these terms meant anything to Naruto, but the fear they inspired in the villagers told him all he needed to know. I don't care if you're the daimyo's personal guard, Naruto said, shifting into a ready stance. Let the kid go, now. The 3 exchanged glances before the leader motioned to his companions. Teach this foreigner how we deal with interference in Wano. The man with the sai released the child and charged at Naruto, weapon spinning in his hands. Despite his depleted state, Naruto's body responded with the muscle memory of countless battles. He sidestepped the first thrust, caught the attacker's wrist, and used the man's own momentum to flip him over his shoulder. The headliner crashed into a wooden stall with a satisfying crunch. The second man came at him with the kanabo raised high. Naruto knew he didn't have the chakra to properly enhance his strength, so instead of blocking, he ducked under the swing and delivered a precise strike to the man's knee. There was a cracking sound, and the headliner howled in pain, his leg buckling beneath him. Naruto turned to face the leader, who had drawn his katana and was regarding him with newfound wariness. You're no ordinary traveler, the leader said, circling cautiously. Those moves. What are you? A ninja from another land. I'm Naruto Uzumaki of the Hidden Leaf Village, he replied, settling into a defensive stance. And I don't like bullies, no matter what world they're from. The leader lunged, his blade whistling through the air with unexpected speed. Naruto barely managed to avoid a fatal blow, the sword slicing a shallow cut across his cheek as he twisted away. Without his usual chakra reserves, he was significantly slower than normal. I need to end this quickly, he thought, feeling fatigue already setting in. He reached for his kunai pouch, grateful to find it still attached to his thigh. The swordsman pressed his advantage, driving Naruto back with a series of rapid slashes. The villagers had scattered, taking shelter in nearby buildings, their fearful faces watching from windows and doorways. Naruto parried a thrust with his kunai, the impact jarring his arm. What kind of samurai terrorizes the people he's supposed to protect? The leader laughed. Samurai. Those honorable fools are nearly extinct. We are pirates, boy. We take what we want. Then you're worse than trash, Naruto spat, channeling what little chakra he had left to his feet for a burst of speed. He darted inside the man's guard, too close for the long blade to be effective, and drove his elbow into the pirate's solar plexus. As the man doubled over, gasping, Naruto brought his knee up into the masked face. The mask cracked, revealing a shocked expression beneath it. The leader staggered back, blood streaming from his nose. "You'll pay for that," he wheezed, raising a small item to his lips. A whistle. The shrill sound cut through the village, and Naruto's heart sank as he heard answering calls from nearby. Reinforcements were coming, and in his current state, he couldn't hope to fight them all. "Time to go," he muttered, scanning the surroundings for an escape route. Before he could move, something struck the leader from behind, a blur of motion so fast Naruto barely registered it. The pirate collapsed face first onto the ground, unconscious before he hit the dirt. Standing behind him was a figure Naruto hadn't noticed before, tall and powerfully built, wearing a half-oni mask that concealed the upper portion of their face. The newcomer was dressed in a kimono with a striking pattern, carrying a massive iron club that should have been too heavy for anyone to wield with such ease. "You're causing trouble, outsider," the masked figure said, voice surprisingly soft despite its stern tone. Naruto tensed, uncertain whether this newcomer was friend or foe. "They started it," he replied, keeping his kunai at the ready. "I just finished it." The masked figure tilted their head, studying him. "Not quite finished. More will come. Follow me if you want to live." Without waiting for a response, they turned and sprinted toward the edge of the village. Naruto hesitated only for a moment. Distant shouts and the thunder of approaching footsteps decided him. He gave the old shopkeeper a quick nod, then dashed after his mysterious rescuer. They ran through winding alleys and narrow paths between buildings, the masked figure moving with confident familiarity through the village. Despite his fatigue, Naruto kept pace, all the while trying to assess whether he was being led to safety or into another trap. "Who are you?" he called out as they ducked under a low archway. "Someone who doesn't like Kaido's men any more than you do," came the terse reply. They emerged at the river's edge, where a small boat was moored beneath overhanging willows. The masked figure gestured toward it. "Get in, quickly." Naruto eyed the craft warily. "Where are we going?" "Away from here, unless you'd prefer to fight 30 more headliners in your condition." As if to emphasize the point, angry voices echoed from the village behind them. Naruto made his decision and jumped into the boat. The masked figure followed, pushing off from the shore with one powerful stroke of their club. The current caught them, carrying them swiftly downstream. Naruto watched the village recede in the distance, aware that he was putting himself entirely in the hands of a stranger in an unknown land. Not the most prudent decision, perhaps, but his gut told him it was the right one. "I'm Naruto," he offered, breaking the silence as they drifted around a bend in the river. The masked figure remained focused on steering the boat but replied after a moment. "You can call me Yamato." Something in the hesitation caught Naruto's attention. "That's not your real name, is it?" The masked figure, Yamato, turned to regard him with eyes that gleamed behind the Oni mask. "In Wano, names can be dangerous things. You'd be wise to remember that." Naruto of the Hidden Leaf. Naruto leaned back against the side of the boat, watching the unfamiliar landscape glide by. Cherry blossoms floated on the breeze, landing on the water's surface like pink stars in a flowing sky. "I have a feeling there's a lot I need to learn about this place," he murmured. Yamato's response was simple but heavy with implication. "If you survive long enough, perhaps you will." The river carried them for hours, winding through lush landscapes that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Naruto took the opportunity to rest, trying to recover what little chakra he could while maintaining vigilant awareness of his surroundings. His mysterious rescuer remained mostly silent, occasionally adjusting their course with the long pole they now used to navigate the shallower stretches. Naruto studied Yamato covertly, trying to discern more about his unexpected ally. Despite the bulky appearance of the kimono, Yamato moved with fluid grace that spoke of extensive combat training. The massive iron club had been set aside but remained within easy reach. Most intriguing was the mask, an Oni face with horns, covering the upper half of Yamato's face. What Naruto could see of the lower half suggested youth, perhaps not much older than himself. "I can feel you staring," Yamato said without turning around. Naruto didn't bother denying it. Just trying to figure out if I've been rescued or captured. That earned him a short, dry laugh. A reasonable question. Let's call it a mutual arrangement of convenience. Meaning I was curious about the foreigner bold enough to challenge Kaido's men in broad daylight. And you needed an escape route. Yamato finally looked back at him. Though I admit, your fighting style was unusual. You're not from Wano, are you? Not even close, Naruto replied with a rueful smile. Though I'm still trying to figure out exactly where, here, is. You mentioned Wano. Is that the name of this country? Yamato regarded him with open suspicion now. Everyone knows of Wano country. Even if you're from the outside world, the name would be familiar to any sailor or merchant. Naruto sighed, deciding honesty was his best approach. Look, this is going to sound crazy. But I'm not just from another country. I think I'm from somewhere else entirely. A different world, maybe. There was a battle, a dimensional jutsu went wrong, and next thing I knew, I was waking up in your forest. Dimensional jutsu. Yamato's voice held skepticism, but also a hint of curiosity. A technique that manipulates space and time, Naruto explained. Where I come from, we use chakra. Yamato interrupted. You're saying you use life energy for techniques. Like hockey. Naruto frowned. I don't know what hockey is, but chakra is the combination of physical and spiritual energy. We use it for ninjutsu, genjutsu, all kinds of techniques. He flexed his hand, trying to summon a small Rasengan as demonstration, but his depleted reserves produced only the faintest blue shimmer before fading. Though I'm not exactly at my best right now. Yamato was silent for a long moment, seemingly processing this information. There are stories, they finally said, old legends about other worlds beyond our own. Most consider them children's tales, but... A pause. The Grand Line has shown us stranger things than visitors from other dimensions. The boat rounded another bend, and Yamato guided them toward a concealed inlet nearly hidden by overhanging foliage. With practiced movements, they secured the craft to an ancient route that extended into the water. We'll stop here for the night, Yamato announced. It's not safe to travel after dark, not just because of Kaido's men, but there are wild beasts in these forests that hunt by moonlight. Naruto nodded, grateful for the chance to rest properly. He helped secure the boat, then followed Yamato up a barely visible path that wound through dense undergrowth. They emerged in a small clearing dominated by the ruins of what must have once been a temple or shrine. Most of the structure had crumbled, but a portion of the roof remained intact, supported by stone pillars engraved with unfamiliar symbols. We can shelter here, Yamato said, moving toward the covered area. It's long abandoned. Most sacred places in Wano are, these days, but it will keep us dry if it rains. Naruto helped gather kindling for a small fire, which Yamato lit with practiced efficiency. As night fell, they sat across from each other, the dancing flames casting shifting shadows across Yamato's masked face. So, Naruto began, accepting a portion of dried fish and rice that Yamato produced from a small pack. What's the deal with these beast pirates and this Kaido person? Those guys in the village seemed to think his name would scare me. Yamato's expression darkened. It should. Kaido is one of the 4 emperors, the most powerful pirates in the world. They say he's unkillable, that he's been captured and executed dozens of times. Only to destroy the prison and walk away unscathed. A pause. He conquered Wano 5 years ago, turning a proud samurai nation into little more than his personal factory and playground. And no one fights back? Naruto asked, finding it hard to believe an entire country would submit to tyranny without resistance. Something shifted in Yamato's posture, a tension that hadn't been there before. There was resistance. Kaido crushed it. The daimyo were murdered or corrupted. The strongest samurai either died in battle or were forced to serve as Kaido's enforcers. A hesitation. Only a handful of true warriors remain, scattered and in hiding, waiting for something. A chance, perhaps, or a miracle. The bitterness in those words told Naruto there was more to the story than Yamato was sharing, something personal. Where I come from, Naruto said quietly, we've faced tyrants and monsters too. People who thought their power made them gods. He poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. They all fall eventually. No one is unkillable. Yamato studied him across the flames. You speak with conviction, for someone stranded in a strange world. Naruto grinned, some of his usual confidence returning. Being in a strange place doesn't change who I am or what I believe. If this Kaido is oppressing innocent people, then he's an enemy worth fighting, no matter what world we're in. You're either very brave or very foolish, Yamato replied, but there was a hint of respect in the tone. Been called both. Many times. Naruto's grin widened momentarily. Why before fading into a more serious expression. So what's your story? You're obviously not one of Kaido's supporters, but you're not just an ordinary villager either. That club of yours, the way you move, you're a fighter. Yamato was silent for so long that Naruto thought the question would go unanswered. Finally, with a movement that seemed almost reluctant, Yamato reached up and removed the Oni mask. Naruto found himself looking at a young woman, not much older than himself, with striking features and intense eyes that held both strength and pain. My name is Yamato, she said, her voice unchanged but somehow more authentic without the mask between them. And I fight against Kaido because I've seen firsthand the destruction he brings. The suffering he causes. Her hands tightened around the mask. I've been training, watching, waiting for years. Building a network of allies who feel the same. A resistance, Naruto said, nodding in understanding. The beginning of one, she corrected. We're few, and Kaido's forces are many. But each day brings more people to our cause as his tyranny grows worse. She set the mask aside, fixing Naruto with a penetrating gaze. Which brings me to you, dimensional traveler. Your arrival is unusual, to say the least. And potentially valuable, if what little I saw of your fighting ability is any indication. Naruto leaned forward. If you, re-asking if I'd help fight against a tyrant, the answer is yes. It's what I'd do in my world, and it's what I'll do here until I find a way home. Yamato's expression remained guarded, but something in her eyes softened slightly. Your willingness to help strangers is commendable. Rare, in these times. She stoked the fire. But I need to know more about you first. These abilities of yours, when you've recovered. What exactly can you do? Naruto considered how to explain the breadth of shinobi techniques to someone from a world where such things might not exist. I'm trained as a ninja, a warrior who uses stealth, combat skills, and special techniques. When I'm at full strength, I can create solid copies of myself, manipulate wind energy, sense negative emotions. He hesitated, unsure how to explain Kurama. And I have a partner, I guess you could say. A source of immense power that I can draw on in times of need. A devil fruit power? Yamato asked, looking intrigued. I don't know what that is, Naruto admitted. Where I come from, I'm what's called a Jinchuriki, a human vessel containing a tailed beast. Mine is the nine-tailed fox, the strongest of them all. Yamato's eyes widened slightly. You harbor a beast within you. And you control this power. It's a partnership, Naruto corrected. Kurama. That's his name, and I work together now. It wasn't always that way, but we've come to respect each other. He frowned. Though he's been unusually quiet since I arrived here. I think the dimensional travel affected him too. Yamato looked thoughtful. It sounds similar to some devil fruit abilities. But different too. In our world, certain fruits grant powers when eaten. The ability to transform into animals, control elements, or more bizarre abilities. But they're external sources, not entities with their own will. What about you? Naruto asked. That club isn't just for show, and I saw how fast you moved against that headliner. A guarded expression returned to Yamato's face. I have certain abilities, she said carefully. Training, primarily, but also. She held out her hand, and to Naruto's amazement, her arm transformed, taking on a wooden quality th. It reminded him of Captain Yamato's wood style back home. I can create and control wood, she explained, reverting her arm to normal. It's a devil fruit power, rare, and useful for both combat and survival. Naruto nodded, impressed. In my world, wood style is an incredibly rare ability. Only a few people have ever mastered it. He smiled at the coincidence. Actually, one of my comrades is named Yamato too, and he uses wood style techniques. Strange coincidence. That earned a small smile from Yamato, the first Naruto had seen. Perhaps it's a sign that our meeting wasn't entirely random. Conversation lulled as they finished their meal. Night had fully descended now, the forest around them alive with unfamiliar sounds. Naruto found himself staring up at the stars, searching for familiar constellations but finding none he recognized. They're different here, he murmured. What is? The stars. The patterns they make. He gestured upward. In my world, I could navigate by them, identify the seasons by their positions. Here, they're all strangers. Yamato followed his gaze upward. I never thought about how even the sky would be different in another world. After a moment, she added, I can teach you our constellations, if you'd like. While you're here. The simple offer of connection touched Naruto more than he expected. I'd like that. They took turns keeping watch through the night. Naruto insisting on taking a shift despite Yamato's concerns about his weakened state. As the fire burned low, they spoke intermittently, sharing carefully chosen details about their respective worlds. Naruto explaining the ninja village system, Yamato describing the vast oceans and divided territories of her world. What neither of them mentioned were the personal details that shaped them, Naruto's lonely childhood as a Jinchuriki, or whatever shadows lurked behind Yamato's determined eyes. Those were truths that required more trust than a single day's acquaintance could build. WN broke with a chorus of unfamiliar birdsong. Naruto, who had taken the final watch, welcomed the sun with a series of stretches, testing his body's recovery. He still felt the hollow ache of chakra depletion, but not as severely as the day before. Yamato emerged from the ruins where she'd been sleeping, her Oni mask once again in place. We should move soon, she said, replacing her club on her back. There's a safe house about half a day's journey from here, people who support our cause. We can rest there, plan our next move. Naruto nodded, gathering what few possessions he had. As they prepared to depart, a distant sound caught his attention, the unmistakable thrum of multiple boats moving at speed. Someone's coming up the river, he warned, dropping into a crouch. Yamato tensed, moving to the edge of the clearing for a better view of the water below. Kaido's men, she confirmed grimly. At least 3 boats. They must be searching the waterways for us. Naruto joined her, assessing the approaching threat. How'd they find us? They didn't, specifically, Yamato replied. But after what happened in the village, they'll be searching every possible escape route. It was only a matter of time. She turned to him. How are your energy levels? Naruto made a quick internal assessment. Better, but nowhere near full strength. Maybe 15% of my normal reserves. Enough to fight, if necessary. Though I'd prefer to avoid it if we can. Yamato nodded. There's another path, through the forest. Slower, but less exposed. She hesitated. Though if they have beasts with them, they might track our scent. Naruto considered their options. Let me try something. He formed a familiar hand sign, concentrating what little chakra he had. Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a puff of smoke, a single clone appeared beside him, not the dozens he could normally create, but one was all he needed. The clone looked a bit pale and insubstantial, but it would serve its purpose. Yamato stared, clearly surprised by the technique. You created a copy of yourself. A solid clone with its own consciousness, Naruto confirmed. He can act independently, create diversions. He turned to his clone. Take the boat downstream, make some noise, draw them away from us. The clone grinned, that familiar, mischievous expression that had gotten Naruto into so much trouble as a youth. Leave it to me, boss. With a salute, it bounded down toward the boat. Yamato watched with fascination as the clone untied the craft and pushed off into the current, deliberately making enough noise to attract attention. That's incredibly useful, she said, genuine appreciation in her voice. One of my specialties, Naruto replied with a hint of pride. Though normally I can make hundreds of them. Yamato's eyes widened behind her mask. Hundreds. She shook her head. When you've recovered your strength, I'd very much like to see that. They retreated into the forest as shouts from the river confirmed that Naruto's clone had successfully drawn their pursuers' attention. Yamato led the way along a barely visible trail, moving with the confident familiarity of someone who had traversed these woods many times before. You know this area well, Naruto observed as they navigated a particularly dense thicket. I've had years to learn every path and hiding place, she replied. Knowledge of the terrain is one of the few advantages we have against Kaido's forces. They traveled in companionable silence for a time, each alert for any sign of pursuit. Eventually, the forest began to thin, giving way to terraced fields that climbed hillsides in neat, geometric patterns. Rice paddies, Yamato explained. Wano's primary crop. Most of the harvest goes to Kaido's forces now, with barely enough left to feed the farmers who grow it. Naruto frowned at the injustice. In my world, the land of rice fields was similarly exploited, by Orochimaru, a rogue ninja who built his hidden bases there. People suffered while he used their resources for his experiments. And what happened to this Orochimaru? He's complicated, Naruto admitted. Eventually defeated, though not before causing immense harm. But the land recovered, once the people were free to determine their own future again. Yamato glanced at him. You speak as though happy endings are inevitable. Not inevitable, Naruto corrected. Hard won, but possible, always possible, as long as people don't give up hope. He met her gaze. That's something I've learned through every battle, every struggle. Hope is the most powerful force there is. Something shifted in Yamato's expression. A softening, perhaps, or the kindling of something that had nearly been extinguished. You remind me of stories I've heard, she said quietly. About a samurai named Odin who once stood against tyranny in Wano. He believed in a better future, even as he burned alive in boiling oil. Naruto winced at the image. Sounds like someone worth admiring. He was. His spirit represents everything that Wano once stood for. Honor, courage, kindness. Yamato's voice took on a reverential quality. I wish I could have met him. They skirted the edge of the rice fields, keeping to the shadows of the forest's edge. In the distance, farmers worked the paddies, backs bent under the watchful eyes of armored overseers. Naruto felt anger kindle in his chest at the sight, the casual cruelty of absolute power. This Kaido, he said, what exactly does he want? Power for its own sake. Yamato's reply was bitter. He wants to build the greatest army of devil fruit users the world has ever seen. Wano provides isolation and resources, metals for weapons, factories for production. The people are just another resource to be used and discarded. And what about you? Naruto asked the question that had been forming since their first meeting. What drives you to fight against him when so many others have accepted his rule? Yamato stopped walking, her back to Naruto. For a long moment, she was silent, and Naruto wondered if he'd pushed too far. Kaido destroyed everything I might have been, she finally said, her voice low and tight with controlled emotion. He represents everything I despise, strength without purpose, power without responsibility. Her hands clenched into fists. And I have personal reasons that I'm not yet ready to share with you, Naruto of the Hidden Leaf. The raw honesty of the answer resonated with Naruto. He knew what it meant to define oneself in opposition to darkness. Fair enough, he said simply. We all have our secrets. Yamato turned, studying him. You're not going to press for more. Naruto shrugged. Trust is earned, not demanded. You'll tell me when you're ready, if you ever are. That earned him another small smile, visible beneath the half-mask. You're an unusual man, Naruto Uzumaki. So I've been told, he replied with a grin. Usually right before someone tries to kill me. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a sudden explosion of knowledge in Naruto's mind. His shadow clone had been discovered and dispersed, sending its memories rushing back to him. They found my clone, he reported, grimacing. 3 boats of headliners, led by someone they called Hawkins. They're turning back upstream now. They know it was a diversion. Yamato tensed. Hawkins is dangerous, one of Kaido's strongest allies. If he's involved in the search personally. She looked around, reassessing their situation. We need to move faster. The safe house isn't far, but we're exposed here. No so. Wonder had she spoken than a distant figure appeared on the ridge above the rice paddies, a tall man with long blonde hair, his silhouette distinctive against the sky. Even at this distance, Naruto could feel the man's focus shift in their direction, like the sudden chill of a predator's gaze. He sees us, Naruto said, unnecessary confirmation of what they both already knew. Run, Yamato commanded, already in motion. Now, They sprinted across the open ground between forest and fields, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind them, Hawkins raised an arm, and straw-like extensions burst from his body, stretching impossibly toward them. "What the hell is that?" Naruto gasped as they ran. "Devil fruit power. The straw fruit," Yamato explained breathlessly. "He can create straw effigies and transfer damage to them or others. Don't let it touch you." The warning came just in time as strands of animated straw lashed out, nearly wrapping around Naruto's ankle. He leapt, channeling what little chakra he had to enhance the jump, clearing the attack by inches. They reached the edge of a ravine, a fast-moving stream cutting through the landscape 30 feet below. Without hesitation, Yamato grabbed Naruto's arm. "Jump," she ordered, and they launched themselves into space together. For a heart-stopping moment, they were airborne, the ravine yawning beneath them. Then Yamato thrust out her free hand, and her arm transformed, extending into a wooden bridge that anchored itself to the opposite cliff face. Using the improvised bridge, they swung across the gap, landing roughly but safely on the other side. Naruto stared at her in amazement. "That's incredible control," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Yamato retracted her arm, reverting it to normal. "I've had years of practice," she replied, though a hint of pride colored her tone. They glanced back to see Hawkins standing at the edge of the ravine, his expression unreadable at this distance. After a moment, he turned away, apparently unwilling to pursue them across the obstacle. "He's not giving up," Yamato warned, already moving again. "Just regrouping. We need to reach the safe house before they circle around." They continued their flight through increasingly rocky terrain, climbing higher into the foothills of what Naruto could now see was a massive mountain range dominating the island's interior. The vegetation changed as they ascended, transitioning from lush forest to hardy pines and scrub brush that clung to the rocky soil. After nearly an hour of hard travel, Yamato led them to what appeared to be a sheer cliff face, partially obscured by a waterfall that cascaded from above. Without explanation, she slipped behind the curtain of water, motioning for Naruto to follow. Behind the waterfall was a narrow ledge leading to a crevice in the rock, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. Yamato navigated it with practiced ease, and Naruto followed, emerging into a surprising sight, a hidden valley. Perhaps half a mile across, sheltered on all sides by towering cliffs. At its center stood a cluster of traditional buildings surrounding a modest wooden structure that might once have been a dojo. "Welcome," Yamato said, removing her mask as they descended toward the settlement, to one of the last free places in Wano. As they approached, people emerged from the buildings, men and women of various ages, some bearing the visible scars of past battles. Their expressions were cautious but not hostile, and several nodded in greeting to Yamato. An elderly man with a magnificent white beard stepped forward. Despite his age, he moved with the fluid grace of a lifelong warrior, a katana at his hip. "Yamato," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "We were concerned when you didn't return yesterday." "Complications arose," she replied, gesturing to Naruto. "This is Naruto Uzumaki, a warrior from elsewhere. He stood against Kaido's men in Echo Village, and Hawkins has taken a personal interest in finding him." The old man's bushy eyebrows rose as he regarded Naruto. "Hawkins himself. You must have made quite an impression, young man." "I have a talent for irritating powerful people," Naruto replied with a sheepish grin. That earned a bark of laughter from the old man. "A useful talent, in these times." He bowed formally. "I am Hitetsu, once a swordsmith to the daimyo of Kuri, now keeper of this refuge." Naruto returned the bow, mindful of the customs Yamato had briefly explained during their journey. "It's an honor to meet you. Thank you for your hospitality." Hitetsu turned to Yamato. "If Hawkins is searching personally, we should strengthen our barriers. Kiku," he called to a tall, elegant figure nearby, "please inform the sentries to double their watch." The person named Kiku, who moved with remarkable grace despite their considerable height, nodded and departed swiftly up a mountain path. "Come," Hitetsu said, gesturing toward the central building. "You both look as though you could use rest and a proper meal. We can discuss matters further once you've recovered your strength." The interior of the building was simple but comfortable, with tatami mats covering the floor and sliding paper doors dividing the space into rooms. A hearth dominated the central area, where a pot of something fragrant simmered over coals. Several others joined them. A grizzled man introduced his Gyukimaru. A young woman called Tama who couldn't have been more than 8 years old but whose eyes held wisdom beyond her years, and eventually Kiku, who Naruto now really. Zed was a woman of unusual height and strength. As they settled around the hearth, accepting bowls of savory soup and cups of strong tea, Naruto felt the weight of curious gazes upon him. Yamato says you're from elsewhere, Hitetsu said. Breaking the silence. What does that mean, exactly? Naruto exchanged a glance with Yamato, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, he explained his situation, the dimensional battle. His arrival in Wano, and his world of shinobi and chakra. He demonstrated what little he could of his abilities, creating another shadow clone that lasted just long out a wave before dispersing in a puff of smoke. The reactions ranged from wide-eyed wonder, Tama, to skeptical interest, Gyukimaru, to thoughtful acceptance, Hitetsu and Kiku. In all my years, Hitetsu mused, stroking his beard, I have never heard of such a thing. Yet in a world where devil fruits exist and men can call down lightning or transform into dragons, who am I to say what is impossible? If what you say is true, Gyukimaru added, his rough voice matching his scarred appearance, your abilities could be valuable to our cause. Assuming you're willing to fight in a war that isn't yours. Naruto met the man's challenging gaze steadily. I've never been good at walking away from people who need help, no matter what world I'm in. He glanced at Yamato. Besides, until I find a home, if there even is one, I need allies as much as you need me. Kiku spoke for the first time, her voice surprisingly gentle for someone of her imposing stature. You speak of returning home. Do you have people waiting for you there? The question struck Naruto with unexpected force. Images flashed through his mind. Sakura's worried face as he was pulled into the vortex, Kakashi reaching futilely toward him. All his friends in Konoha who might believe him dead. Yes, he said quietly. People I care about. People who depend on me. He squared his shoulders. But I've learned that dwelling what you can't change only paralyzes you. For now, I'm here, and I'll make the most of it. A wise perspective, Hitetsu nodded approvingly. Little Tama, who had been watching Naruto with fascination, suddenly piped up. Can you make more of yourself? Lots and lots. Could you fill the whole valley? The childlike question brought smiles to every face, breaking the tension. Naruto laughed. When my strength returns, yes. Hundreds of me, all solid, all able to think and act independently. Tama's eyes grew round. That's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Even better than Komichio's tricks. Komichio? Naruto asked. My dog, Tama replied proudly. He's as big as a house. But he's hunting now, so you'll meet him later. Hitetsu chuckled at Naruto's startled expression. Many animals in Wano grow to unusual sizes, particularly in the wilder regions. It's one of the many things that make our land unique. As the conversation continued, Naruto found himself drawn into the web of relationships that defined this small resistance community. They were not just fighters united against Kaido, but a makeshift family bound by shared suffering and hope. They spoke of their lives before Kaido's arrival, of traditions maintained in secret, of small victories against the beast pirates. Throughout it all, Naruto found his gaze repeatedly drawn to Yamato. Without her mask, her expressions were more visible. The fierce pride when speaking of Wano's heritage, the controlled anger when Kaido was mentioned, the gentle patience she showed with young Tama. There was a complexity to her that intrigued him. Layers of strength and vulnerability carefully balanced. As the meal concluded, Hitetsu rose. You both need rest. We've prepared sleeping quarters for you, Naruto-san. Tomorrow, we can discuss what your arrival might mean for our struggle. Naruto bowed in thanks, genuinely grateful for the hospitality. As the group dispersed, Yamato lingered, catching his eye. Walk with me, she suggested, gesturing toward the sliding door that led to an outer Engawa overlooking the valley. Outside, the sun was setting behind the western cliffs, painting the hidden valley in gold and amber. They stood side by side, watching the last light fade from the sky. Thank you, Naruto said after a comfortable silence. For bringing me here, for trusting me. Yamato nodded, her gaze still on the horizon. There's something about you that inspires trust, even caution. She turned to face him. But I should warn you, not everyone will welcome your help so readily. Some have been betrayed too often to risk hope again. I understand, Naruto replied. Trust is earned, not given. I don't expect everyone to believe in me right away. Yamato studied him, her expression thoughtful. You've faced this before, haven't you? Being the outsider, having to prove yourself. The observation was surprisingly perceptive. Most of my life, Naruto admitted. Where I come from, I grew up as the village pariah. The 9 tails sealed inside me was feared and hated for the destruction it had caused. It took years to change people's minds, to show them I wasn't the monster they thought I was. And you succeeded, Naruto smiled, remembering how far he'd come from those lonely days. Eventually, now I'm respected, even admired. But I never forget what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. It's part of what drives me to help others who are suffering. Yamato's expression softened. That explains a lot about you. She hesitated, then added, I understand something of what that's like, being defined by something you didn't choose. She looked away, her profile stark against the darkening sky. We have that in common, it seems. Before Naruto could respond, a commotion from the settlement's edge drew their attention. Kiku was running toward them, her usual grace replaced by urgency. Yamato-sama, Hitetsu-sama, she called. Scouts report a large force approaching from the south, beast pirates. Led by Hawkins and several headliners. Hitetsu emerged from the main building, his earlier warmth replaced by a commander's focus. How many? At least 50, with hunting beasts, Kiku reported grimly. They're following your trail from the river. We have perhaps an hour before they reach the hidden entrance. Yamato's expression hardened. They shouldn't have been able to track us through the waterfall. Someone must have revealed the location. Or Hawkins used those cards of his to divine it, Gyukimaru growled, joining them with his massive weapon already in hand. Hitetsu turned to the gathered residents, who had emerged from their homes at the alarm. Prepare for evacuation. Secondary location. Take only what you can carry. The community burst into coordinated activity, RS of drills and preparation evident in their efficient movements. Naruto watched, impressed by their discipline but concerned by the fear visible on many faces. This has happened before, he observed. Twice, Yamato confirmed, her voice tight. Each time we lose more people, more resources. Each time we're forced further into hiding. Naruto felt anger building within him. Not the hot, impulsive rage of his youth, but the cold, focused determination that had carried him through his most difficult battles. He closed his eyes, turning his awareness inward. Kurama, can you hear me? I could really use your help right now. For the first time since his arrival, he felt a stirring in response, faint, but unmistakable. The 9 tails was still there, still connected to him, just weakened as he was by the dimensional transition. Kit, where are we? The mental voice was faint, disoriented. Another world, apparently, and already neck-deep in trouble, as usual. A rumbling that might have been a chuckle. Of course, you are. Naruto smiled inwardly. Can you lend me some chakra? Not a lot, just enough to create a decent number of shadow clones. These people need help. I'm recovering. But take what you need. Warmth flooded through Naruto's chakra network, not the overwhelming power he was accustomed to, but enough. A significant improvement. He opened his eyes to find Yamato watching him curiously. Your expression changed, she said. What happened? Just had a conversation with my roommate, Naruto replied with a small smile. He's finally waking up. Understanding dawned in Yamato's eyes. The 9 tails. It's conscious again. Naruto corrected gently. And yes, Kurama's recovering, like I am. He flexed his hands, feeling the familiar tingle of chakra. Not at full strength yet, but better. Enough to make a difference tonight. Hitetsu approached them, his aged face set with determination. Yamato, you should go with the evacuees. You're too important to risk capture. No, she replied firmly. I'm staying to help defend the retreat. This is my responsibility. I led the beast pirates here, even unknowingly. The old swordsmith looked as though he might argue. Then sighed in resignation. Very well, but be careful, if you were to fall into Kaido's hands. Something dark flickered across Yamato's face. That won't happen. I'd die first. The vehemence in her voice struck Naruto. There was history there, something deeply personal in her hatred of Kaido, beyond the general oppression of Wano. Neither of those things is going to happen, Naruto interjected. Not dying, not capture. He stepped forward, addressing both of them. I have an idea, but I'll need to know more about this Hawkins and his abilities. Hitetsu and Yamato exchanged glances. Basil Hawkins is known as the magician, Hitetsu explained. His devil fruit allows him to manipulate straw, creating dolls that can absorb damage meant for him or transfer it to others. He also uses divination cards to predict outcomes and identify weaknesses, Yamato added. Many believe he can see the future, though it's more likely he's calculating probabilities based on the information available to him. Naruto nodded, formulating a plan. And the other fighters with him? The headliners. What can I expect? Enhanced strength. Various weapons, Yamato replied. Some may have partial animal transformations, smile fruits that grant them beast-like qualities. Unpredictable, but generally more brute force than strategy. Perfect, Naruto said, a familiar confidence returning to his voice. Then here's what we're going to do. The beast pirates approached the waterfall at dusk, the fading light glinting off their weapons and armor. At their head walked Basil Hawkins, his tall, lean figure unmistakable even in the growing shadows. Beside him prowled what appeared to be massive hunting dogs, their noses to the ground as they followed the scent trail. The foreigners definitely came this way, one of the headliners reported. The beasts are certain. Hawkins nodded, his expression impassive as always. He drew a card from the deck at his waist, studied it momentarily. Then pointed toward the waterfall. Behind there, a hidden entrance. The headliners exchanged excited glances. Finding one of the resistance hideouts would mean substantial rewards from Kaido. Shall we charge in? Asked an eager headliner with a partial horse transformation, a legacy of the defective smile fruits. No, Hawkins replied calmly. They know we're coming. The cards show prepared defenders. He shuffled his deck thoughtfully. But their chance of escape is only 68%. Send the beasts in first, then follow in formation. The hunting dogs were unleashed, bounding toward the waterfall with savage growls. They disappeared behind the curtain of water, and for a moment, there was silence. Then came the yelps of pain and surprise. What's happening? Demanded the horse headliner. Before Hawkins could respond, something, or rather, someone, burst through the waterfall. Not one, but dozens of identical figures, all with spiky blonde hair and whisker marks on their cheeks. Each wearing the same determined expression. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The original Naruto shouted from his position high above the waterfall, having completed the hand sign that multiplied his presence. With his connection to Kurama partially restored, he'd managed to create 50 solid clones, not his usual army, but enough for what he had planned. The beast pirates faltered, confused by the sudden appearance of multiple identical opponents. Hawkins alone remained calm, rapidly drawing and reading his cards. Interesting, he murmured. A Paramesha-type ability I've not encountered before. Talk later, growled one of the senior headliners. Kill them now. The pirates surged forward, weapons drawn, only to find that fighting Naruto's clones was like trying to capture smoke. The clones leapt, dodged, and counterattacked with coordinated precision, each one acting independently yet part of a greater strategy. From his vantage point, Naruto directed the battle, gauging the strengths and weaknesses of their opponents. Hawkins was clearly the most dangerous. His straw extensions lashed out, capturing and crushing any clone that came too near. When a clone did manage to land a blow, the damage simply transferred to one of Hawkins' straw dolls, which crumbled while the man himself remained unharmed. Fascinating, Hawkins commented, dispatching another clone with a sweep of his arm turned side. Your probability of victory should be 0, yet it refuses to calculate properly. His eyes narrowed. What are you? A clone nearby grinned. Someone who changes the odds. While most of the clones engaged the beast pirates directly, others were executing the second part of Naruto's plan. Using the chaos of battle as cover, they guided the evacuees, including Hitetsu, Tama, and the other non-combatants, along a secondary escape route that led away from the valley through a narrow mountain pass. Yamato, meanwhile, had positioned herself strategically above the battlefield. As planned, She waited until the majority of beast pirates were fully committed to the fight before making her move. Wood style. Nativity of a world of trees. She called out, slamming her palms together. The ground beneath the pirates erupted as massive wooden branches shot upward, ensnaring many in their rapidly growing tendrils. The technique wasn't as refined or powerful as the wood style Naruto knew from his world. But its effect was impressive nonetheless. "The woman!" shouted one of the few headliners who had avoided entanglement. "She's the one Lord Kaido wants." Hawkins turned his calculating gaze toward Yamato. Cards flickering between his fingers. Probability of capture. Rising. Interesting. He extended his straw-transformed arm toward her position, but before it could reach her, Naruto, the real one, intercepted the attack, slicing through the straw appendage with a wind chakra-enhanced kunai. "Your fight is with me," Naruto declared, landing between Hawkins and Yamato's position. He could feel his restored chakra humming through his body, not at full capacity, but enough to face this opponent directly. Hawkins regarded him with clinical interest. "You protect her, yet you've known her less than 2 days, according to my information." "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Naruto replied simply. "And because I know what it's like to fight for a homeland threatened by tyrants." Sentiment, Hawkins observed dispassionately. "A statistical weakness." He drew 3 cards in rapid succession. "Your probability of defeat, 83%. Naruto grinned. "Never tell me the odds." He charged forward, weaving through Hawkins' straw attacks with the fluid grace of years of combat experience. The magician was powerful, but Naruto had faced far worse opponents. Gods and monsters and men with eyes that could rewrite reality. What Hawkins had in power and calculation, he lacked in adaptability. His fighting style relied on prediction, on knowing the statistical outcome of any given action. But Naruto had built a career on being unpredictable, on changing fate's trajectory through sheer stubborn will. As they clashed, straw extensions against shadow clones, divination cards against wind chakra techniques, Yamato continued her part of the plan, systematically capturing or disabling the remaining headliners with her wood-style abilities. Those few who managed to avoid her wooden prison found themselves facing Kiku and Gyukimaru, who had remained behind as the rear guard for the evacuation. The battle reached its crescendo as Naruto finally breached Hawkins' defenses. The pirate had expended his straw dolls, each one taking damage meant for him until none remained. Now vulnerable, he found himself face to face with Naruto's determination. "Impossible," Hawkins muttered, his cards showing outcomes he couldn't comprehend. The probability was clear. "That's the thing about probability," Naruto replied, chakra swirling in his palm as he RMED a compact Rasengan, smaller than usual but still potent. "It doesn't account for heart." The spiraling sphere of energy slammed into Hawkins' chest, sending him flying backward into the cliff face. The impact cracked the stone, and Hawkins slid to the ground, defeated but conscious. "You're not from this world," the magician gasped, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "The cards, they can't read you properly." Naruto approached cautiously. "Tell your boss to leave these people alone." Hawkins actually laughed, a strained, pained sound. "Kaido doesn't take orders, especially not from mysterious foreigners with unusual abilities." His eyes narrowed. "But he will be very interested in you now, and in your connection to the one called Yamato." Before Naruto could respond, a massive explosion rocked the cliffside. From the newly formed breach emerged what could only be described as a dinosaur, a massive, spiked creature with razor-sharp teeth and cold, reptilian eyes. "Ex-Drake," Yamato warned. Appearing at Naruto's side, another of Kaido's allies with ancient zone devil fruit power. "We need to go, now. We've bought enough time for the others to escape." Naruto nodded, understanding the strategic retreat. They'd accomplished their primary objective, ensuring the evacuation of the resistance members. Pushing for complete victory now would be reckless. As the dinosaur man charged toward them, Naruto created one final wave of shadow clones to cover their escape. He and Yamato raced toward the secondary exit, leaving behind a battlefield of destroyed pirates, wooden constructs, and confused hunting beasts. They caught up with the evacuees several miles away, in a narrow mountain pass that twisted through the most inhospitable terrain Naruto had yet seen in Wano. The group had established a temporary camp, with sentries posted at strategic points to warn of pursuit. Hitetsu greeted their return with visible relief. You succeeded. For now, Yamato replied, her expression grim. But we've lost another sanctuary, and Hawkins now knows my face, and Naruto's abilities. A calculated risk, the old swordsmith acknowledged. But worth it. Everyone escaped, and they dealt Kaido's forces a significant blow. He turned to Naruto. Your strategy was impressive, young man. Few have faced Hawkins directly and lived to tell of it. Naruto accepted the praise with a modest nod. Though fatigue was setting in now that the bottle's adrenaline was fading. Creating and maintaining so many shadow clones had drained his still recovering chakra reserves. Yamato noticed his exhaustion. You should rest, she said, leading him to a sheltered area where bedrolls had been prepared. We have a long journey tomorrow to reach the next safe haven. Naruto didn't argue, gratefully sinking onto the offered bedding. As Yamato turned to leave, he caught her wrist lightly. Wait, there's something I want to ask you. She hesitated, then knelt beside him. What is it? Hawkins said something that bothered me. He mentioned Kaido wanting you specifically. Naruto studied her face, noting the way her expression closed at the mention of the Emperor. Why would Kaido have a particular interest in you, Yamato? She was silent for a long moment, her internal struggle visible in the tension of her shoulders and the tightening of her jaw. Finally, she met his gaze directly, a decision made. Because, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, Kaido is my father. Naruto's eyes widened, but before he could respond, Yamato continued, the words rushing out as if she'd held them back too long. I was born his child, but I reject everything he stands for. I've spent my life trying to atone for the accident of my birth by fighting against his tyranny. Her hands clenched into fists. That's why I admire Kazuki Oden so much. He represented everything my father is not. Kindness, honor, freedom. Naruto absorbed this revelation, understanding now the personal vendetta that drove her. That's why you were so cautious about trusting me. Why you keep so much hidden. She nodded. If Kaido's men captured me, it wouldn't mean mere death. It would mean being forced to serve him. To become the weapon he always intended me to be. Her voice hardened. I would rather die than let that happen. Naruto reached out, placing his hand over her clenched fist. Thank you for telling me. For trusting me with this. Yamato looked down at their hands, then back to his face. You fought for people you barely know today, risked your life for our cause without hesitation. I think you've earned a measure of trust. Well, Naruto said with a small smile, it seems we have more in common than I realized. Both of us carrying legacies we didn't choose, both fighting to death. In ourselves beyond what others see in us. A genuine smile touched Yamato's lips, transforming her serious features. Perhaps that's why I felt I could trust you from the beginning. Something in you recognized something in me. Kindred spirits, Naruto agreed, feeling a connection forming between them that went beyond their brief acquaintance. Yamato stood, composing herself. Rest now. Tomorrow brings new challenges. She hesitated, then added, thank you, Naruto, for everything you did today. As she walked away to help with the camp's organization, Naruto settled back, his mind processing all that had happened since his arrival in this strange world. In just 2 days, he'd been thrown into an unfamiliar conflict, made allies, and faced powerful enemies. Yet somehow, despite the differences between this world and his own, the core truths remained the same. People fighting for freedom against oppression, the strong preying upon the weak, and the vital importance of those who stood against tyranny. You certainly don't waste time finding trouble. Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind, stronger now than before. It's a talent. Naruto replied silently. What do you think of this place? Of these people? The woman interests me, the Nine Tails observed. She carries darkness and light in equal measure. And this world, it resonates strangely with our chakra. Different, yet compatible. Can we get home? The question that had lingered at the back of Naruto's mind since his arrival. Kurama was silent for a moment. Perhaps, eventually, the dimensional tear that brought us her. Left traces, a signature I might be able to follow once we're both at full strength. But it will take time. Time we'll use helping these people, Naruto decided. I can't turn my back on their struggle. Not when I have the power to make a difference. Always the hero, asterisk Kurama grumbled, but there was affection in the complaint. Get some rest, Kit. I have a feeling this adventure is just beginning. As sleep claimed him, Naruto's last thoughts were of Yamato, her strength, her determination, and the unexpected connection forming between them. In this strange new world, she was his first ally, his guide, and perhaps something more. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Bonds forged in fire. Dawn broke over the mountain refuge, pale light spilling across a landscape vastly different from the hidden valley they'd abandoned. Here, amidst the craggy peaks of Wano's northern range, the resistance had established another sanctuary, more primitive than the last, but harder to find and easier to defend. Naruto sat cross-legged on a flat stone overlooking the encampment, his eyes closed in meditation. 3 days had passed since the battle at the waterfall, days spent in constant motion as the survivors relocated to this remote hideaway. Now, finally, they had a moment to breathe, to plan, to recover. Your concentration has improved, Yamato observed, approaching silently from behind him. Naruto opened his eyes, offering a small smile. Good morning to you too. She settled beside him on the stone, her oni mask absent this morning, hair pulled back in a simple tie that accentuated her strong features. In the days since her revelation about Kaido, a subtle shift had occurred between them, a lowering of guards, a tentative trust. I can feel my chakra reserves rebuilding, Naruto explained, stretching his arms above his head. Kurama thinks we'll both be at maybe 70% capacity in another week or so. Kurama, Yamato repeated. It's strange to hear you speak of the creature inside you as a person, with a name. He is a person, Naruto replied simply. Different from humans, ancient and powerful, but still someone with thoughts and feelings and a history of his own. He chuckled. Mostly grumpy feelings, but still. Yamato considered this, her expression thoughtful. In our world, we think of power as something to be possessed, controlled. A devil fruit ability becomes part of you, but it isn't, separate. It doesn't talk back. Sounds more convenient, Naruto grinned. But I wouldn't trade my partnership with Kurama for anything now. Though it took us years to reach this point. You mentioned once that people feared you because of him, Yamato said, her voice carefully neutral. What was that like? The question hung between them. Unexpectedly personal. Naruto gazed out over the mountain landscape, gathering his thoughts. Lonely, he finally said. I grew up without parents. They died the day I was born. The day Kurama was sealed inside me. The adults in the village knew what I contained, and they feared it, feared me. Children follow their parents' lead, so. He shrugged. I spent most of my childhood trying desperately to be seen, to be acknowledged. I played pranks, shouted about becoming Hokage, anything to make people look at me as something other than the monster they thought I was. Yamato's eyes reflected understanding too deep to be mere sympathy. And eventually they saw you. Eventually, Naruto nodded. One person at a time. My teacher Iruka was the first. Then my teammates, my friends. With every battle I fought to protect them, more people began to see me as Naruto, not as the Nine Tails. A soft smile touched his lips. Now I'm respected in the village, trusted. It's still strange sometimes, after so many years of the opposite. The silence that followed was comfortable, a shared understanding that needed no words. My situation was similar in some ways, Yamato finally said. Her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Though the circumstances were different. I wasn't feared by everyone. I was isolated by my father's design. Raised to be a weapon, kept RT from others except for combat training. Naruto listened, understanding the weight of trust in each word she shared. When I was 8, I found Odin's logbook hidden among scrolls in Kaido's library, she continued. Reading about his adventures, his kindness, his sacrifice, it changed something in me. Showed me a different path than the one my father had laid out. Her hands clenched slightly. I began to secretly defy him. Small acts at first, then larger ones until I finally escaped 4 years ago. That took incredible courage, Naruto said quietly. Yamato shook her head. It took desperation. Kaido was planning to announce me as his heir, to place me in a position of power within the Beast Pirates. I couldn't let that happen. She turned to face him directly. I'd rather die than become what he wants me to be. The fierce determination in her eyes stirred something in Naruto: respect, admiration, and something less easily defined. We're both fighting against the legacies others tried to force on us, he observed. You rejecting your father's path, me transforming what the village saw as a curse into a strength. Yamato's expression softened. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yes. She stood, stretching muscles stiff from sitting. Speaking of strength, Hitetsu tells me you've been asking about training grounds. I need to get back into shape, Naruto confirmed, rising beside her. My techniques are rusty, and I'm still not at full capacity. If I'm going to help your resistance, I need to be at my best. I might be able to help with that. The hint of a challenge entered her voice. If you're willing to spar with me. Naruto's eyes lit with interest. Now that sounds promising. The makeshift training area was a natural clearing about half a mile from the main camp. Ringed by towering pines that would muffle the sounds of combat. Several members of the resistance had gathered to watch, curious about the stranger with the unusual powers who had faced Hawkins and lived. Naruto stood at one end of the clearing, rolling his shoulders to loosen them. Across from him, Yamato had removed her outer robe, revealing a fitted garment beneath that allowed for greater mobility. Her club rested against a nearby tree. This would be a test of techniques, not weapons. The rules? Naruto asked. No lethal force, Yamato replied with the ghost of a smile. Beyond that, use whatever abilities you wish. I want to understand what you're capable of. Naruto nodded, settling into a familiar stance. Ready when you are. They circled each other cautiously, each assessing the other's movements. Naruto knew better than to underestimate his opponent. He'd seen enough to recognize that Yamato was an experienced and formidable fighter, devil fruit powers aside. She moved first, darting forward with surprising speed to test his defenses with a series of precise strikes. Naruto blocked and countered, their initial exchanges more like a conversation than a battle. Each learning the other's language of combat. You fight like someone trained from childhood, Yamato observed, sliding under a punch to strike at his ribs. Naruto twisted away from the blow. Academy training from age 6. Plus a whole lot of life or death experience after that. He countered with a sweep that she neatly avoided. You move like someone used to fighting opponents twice your size. That earned a genuine smile as she backflipped away from his next attack. Occupational hazard when your father's commanders are all giants and ancient creatures. The pace increased gradually, their movements becoming faster. Strikes harder. Naruto began incorporating more of his shinobi techniques, not just taijutsu but the strategic movement and positioning that had been drilled into him since childhood. When Yamato extended her arm, transforming it into a wooden spear that shot toward him with startling speed, Naruto responded instinctively. His hands flashed through signs. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 5 clones appeared, surrounding Yamato in a coordinated attack pattern. She adapted immediately, her devil fruit power manifesting as multiple wooden extensions that engaged each clone simultaneously. The spectators murmured in appreciation as the sparring match escalated into something more spectacular, shadow clones and wood constructs clashing across the clearing in a display unlike anything they'd seen before. Your control is impressive, Naruto called out as he substituted with one of his clones to avoid a wooden cage that erupted from the ground. The wood-style users in my world would be jealous. And your clones are remarkable, Yamato countered, dispersing 2 with a sweeping wooden arm. Each one thinks independently. Completely, Naruto confirmed. And when they disperse, I get their memories and experience. He demonstrated by having a clone circle behind her while he engaged from the front. When she focused on the original, the clone attacked, only to be caught by a wooden tendril. The instant before it dispersed, the clone made a specific observation about a pattern in her defensive movements. Naruto immediately adjusted his approach, using the newly acquired knowledge to slip past her guard and tap her shoulder. Point, he said with a grin. Yamato's eyes widened in understanding. That's incredibly useful for reconnaissance. Among other things, Naruto agreed, creating 3 more clones to replace those she'd eliminated. Your turn. The sparring continued, each of them revealing more of their abilities as trust and competitive spirit grew. Why? Yamato demonstrated the versatility of her devil fruit, creating not just weapons but shields, platforms, and even a wooden clone of herself that confused Naruto's attack pattern momentarily. For his part, Naruto introduced more complex techniques, transformation jutsu, substitution, even a small Rasengan that he deliberately directed into the ground rather than at Yamato, leaving a spiral impression in the earth. By the time they called a draw, both were breathing hard, sweat dampened and grinning with the exhilaration of having found a worthy training partner. The spectators had grown in number, resistance fighters drawn by word of the impressive display. That, Yamato declared as they bowed formally to conclude the match, was the most educational sparring session I've had in years. Agreed, Naruto replied, wiping his brow. Though I think we've attracted more attention than you intended. Hitetsu approached from among the onlookers, his aged face alight with something Naruto hadn't seen before, hope. Remarkable. Both of you, the old swordsmith said. But together, I begin to see possibilities I had not dared consider before. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. Yamato, might I speak with you and our new ally? I believe the time has come to consider a more proactive approach. The council gathered that evening in Hitetsu's tent, a simple structure that served as both his living quarters and the Resistance's strategic center. Maps of Wano covered the low table, weighted down with stones and marked with annotations in a careful hand. Present were Hitetsu himself, Kiku, whose graceful demeanor belied her skill with a blade, Gyukimaru, scarred and suspicious of everything, a middle-aged woman introduced as Amatsuki, who apparently coordinated their limited spy network, and of course, Yamato and Naruto. For years, we have focused on survival, Hitetsu began, his voice carrying the weight of long struggle. Hiding, recruiting quietly, building our strength will. Staying beneath Kaido's notice as much as possible. He looked around the circle. Perhaps it is time we reconsider this approach. Gyukimaru growled low in his throat. If you're suggesting open rebellion. The last attempt cost us half our fighters and accomplished nothing. Not open rebellion, Hitetsu clarified. But targeted action. Strike where it hurts, then fade away before retaliation can find us. Yamato leaned forward, studying the map. What did you have in mind? Hitetsu's gnarled finger pointed to a location on the coast. This facility has been converted to manufacture weapons, not traditional swords. But the new firearms that Kaido has been introducing to his forces. It's heavily guarded but isolated enough that a small team might approach undetected. Sabotage, Kiku observed, her voice soft but intent. It would certainly disrupt Kaido's plans. Those weapons give his forces an advantage over traditional samurai. A significant advantage, Amatsuki agreed. Our sour CES indicate he's planning to arm all his headliners with these firearms within the month. If we could delay that, it's worth considering, Yamato said, studying the map carefully. A targeted strike, in and out before they realize what's happening. She glanced at Naruto. Your shadow clones would be invaluable for this kind of operation. Naruto examined the map, military strategy clicking eye. NTO place. Lessons learned from years of missions and battles. We'd need precise intelligence about guard rotations, entry points, and the facility layout. I can provide some of that, Amatsuki offered. One of our people works in the kitchens there. Not enough access for complete plans, but better than going in blind. Debate continued late into the night, the initial concept evolving into a specific plan of attack. Naruto found himself impressed by the resistance leaders' strategic thinking despite their limited resources. These were not amateurs playing at rebellion but committed fighters, who had survived years of oppression through wit and will. As the council concluded, assignments distributed and timing agreed upon, Hitetsu held Naruto back with a gentle hand on his arm. There is something you should know, the old man said once the others had departed. About Yamato. Naruto tensed slightly. She told me about her father, if that's what concerns you. Hitetsu nodded. That shish. He trusted you with that information speaks volumes. But there is more to understand about her position within our movement. He sighed, suddenly looking every year of his considerable age. She is more than just another fighter to us. She represents legitimacy, in a way. The child of our oppressor choosing to stand against him carries powerful symbolism for those who might otherwise lose hope. A symbol, Naruto echoed. Understanding dawning. That's why you wanted her to evacuate first at the valley. Why you're protective of her. Partly, Hitetsu acknowledged. Though her abilities are also genuinely valuable. But yes, if something happened to her, particularly if she were captured and forced to Kaido's side, the psychological impact on our people would be devastating. Naruto considered this, recognizing the complex politics at play. Does she know that you see her this way? She knows, Hitetsu confirmed with a small smile, and chafes against it constantly. Yamato has never wanted to be a symbol. She wants to be on the front lines, fighting directly for Wano's freedom. Like Oden did, Naruto observed. Hitetsu's bushy eyebrows rose. She's told you about her admiration for him as well. You've gotten further past her defenses than most. Naruto shrugged, unexpectedly self-conscious. We've found we have some things in common. The old swordsmith studied him, wisdom in his ancient eyes. Indeed you do, more than either of you may yet realize. He turned back to the maps. The mission leaves tomorrow at dusk. You should rest while you can. The coastal facility rose, like an ugly scar against Wano's natural beauty, a blocky structure of stone and metal, belching smoke into the night sky from multiple chimneys. Originally a traditional foundry where master craftsmen had forged legendary blades, it had been perverted under Kaido's rule into a factory for mass-producing the crude but effective firearms that were changing warfare throughout this world. Naruto Krook, head beside Yamato on a wooded ridge overlooking the compound, both of them dressed in dark clothing that blended with the shadows. Below them, Kiku and two other resistance fighters waited among the trees, ready to create a diversion if needed. 4 guard towers, Naruto observed, his enhanced senses cataloging the facility's defenses. Regular patrols along the wall every 8 minutes. 2 main gates, north and east, both heavily manned. Yamato nodded, her expression focused beneath her half-mask. The weapons are assembled in the central building, according to our intelligence. The materials are prepared in the smaller structures surrounding it. So we target the central building for maximum impact, Naruto concluded. I'll send shadow clones to scout the interior first. Once we confirm the layout matches Amatsuki's information, we move to the second phase. The plan was straightforward in concept. Infiltrate the facility, plant explosive tags Naruto had created from local materials at strategic points, and withdraw before detonation. The challenge lay in the execution, moving undetected through a heavily guarded compound where they would stand out immediately if spotted. Ready? Yamato asked, adjusting her mask. Naruto formed the familiar hand sign. Shadow clone jutsu, he whispered, creating 10 clones that immediately transformed their appearance using the transformatio technique to resemble beast pirate underlings they had observed during their reconnaissance. The disguised clones descended toward the facility, separating to approach from different directions. Naruto closed his eyes, focusing on the sensory input as each clone navigated the perimeter defenses. East Gate has a shift change happening, he murmured. That's our window. 3 minutes. They moved silently down the ridge, using the shadows cast by the facility's exterior lighting to their advantage. When they reached the tree line, Yamato signaled to Kiku, who nodded in acknowledgement of the timing. The East Gate's guard shift created the brief distraction they needed. As new guards replaced the old, Naruto and Yamato slipped through, hugging the interior wall and making their way toward the central building. Through his clone's eyes, Naruto tracked guard movements, directing their path to avoid detection. 2 o'clock, he whispered as they pressed against a stack of crates. Patrol coming around the corner. Yamato reacted instantly, extending her wooden abilities to create a quick shelter that blended with the surrounding construction materials. The patrol passed within feet of their position, oblivious to their presence. Inside the main building, Naruto's transformed clones had successfully mapped the interior, identifying the crucial assembly areas and material stockpiles. One by one, the clones dispersed themselves, each burst of knowledge adding to Naruto's mental map of the facility. The primary assembly floor is 1 level down, he informed Yamato as they slipped through a side entrance. 3 overseers, about 20 workers, all concentrated on the eastern side. The western section is where they store completed weapons and ammunition. Perfect, Yamato replied, her voice barely audible. That's our primary target. They moved through shadowed corridors, the sounds of machinery and labor growing louder as they approached the heart of the operation. When they reached the main assembly floor, They paused behind a pile of shipment crates, observing the activity below. Workers, many looking like ordinary Wano citizens, pressed into service, moved with the mechanical precision of those who labor under threat. Overseers stalked between production lines, clubs or whips in hand, occasionally barking orders or threats. Those people, Naruto whispered, eyes narrowing at the visible exhaustion and fear on the workers' faces. They're prisoners, aren't they? Yamato nodded grimly. From villages that resisted taxation or couldn't meet production quotas. Ito doesn't waste potentially useful labor. If you're not executed as an example, you're put to work. The injustice of it burned in Naruto's chest, but he forced himself to focus on their mission. We need to ensure they get out before detonation. That wasn't part of the plan, Yamato reminded him, though he could see conflict in her eyes. Plans change, Naruto replied firmly. I'm not leaving innocent people to die. We'll adjust. After a moment, Yamato nodded. We'll trigger the facility's fire alarm system when we're ready. That should evacuate the workers. She pointed toward a storage area across the floor. That's where we need to plant the explosives. They circled around the upper level, using overhead walkways to cross above the busy production floor unnoticed. The weapons store area was less populated. Just 2 guards positioned at its entrance, checking inventory lists with bored expressions. I'll handle them, Naruto whispered, creating 2 more transformed clones. The clones approached the guards openly, disguised as beast pirate messengers with urgent communications. While the guards were distracted, Naruto and Yamato slipped past into the storage facility. Inside, rack upon rack of newly manufactured firearms gleamed in the low light. Hundreds of weapons that would soon be distributed to Kaido's forces, tipping the balance even further against the traditional samurai who opposed him. These could arm an entire army, Yamato observed, voice tight with controlled anger. No wonder Hitetsu considered this a priority target. Naruto nodded, already removing the explosive tags from his pouch. Let's make sure they never leave this building. They worked quickly, placing the explosive tags at structural points where they would cause maximum damage not just to the weapons but to the facility's production capability. Naruto had designed the tags with delayed fuses, giving them 15 minutes to escape after activation. That's the last one, he said, securing a tag to a support beam. Now we need to trigger that alarm and a massive explosion rocked the building, throwing them both off balance. But it hadn't come from their explosives. The sound came from outside the facility. That's not part of the plan, Yamato said, eyes wide behind her mask. Shouts and running footsteps filled the corridors outside the storage room. Through the small window in the door, they could see beast pirates rushing toward the source of the commotion. Something's wrong, Naruto said, creating a shadow clone that transformed and slipped out to investigate. Ted intense silence until the clone dispersed itself, sending information flooding back to Naruto. His expression darkened. It's Kiku and the others. They're engaged in direct combat at the north gate. It looks like they were discovered. They were supposed to remain hidden unless we signaled, Yamato said, confusion and concern warring in her voice. I know. Something must have gone wrong. Naruto activated the explosive tags. Starting the countdown. Change of plan. We need to help them and get everyone out before this place blows. They abandoned stealth, bursting out of the storage room and racing toward the north gate. The facility had erupted into chaos, workers fleeing in panic, guards shouting contradictory orders, alarms blaring from multiple sources. When they reached the north gate, the scene that greeted them was one of desperate battle. Kiku fought with breathtaking skill, her blade a blur as she held off multiple opponents. The 2 resistance fighters with her were similarly engaged, but one was already wounded, fighting on despite blood soaking his side. And against them stood a figure that made even Yamato falter, an enormous man with mechanical modifications visible on his arm and torso. His face contorted in sadistic glee as he directed the beast pirates' counterattack. Queen, Yamato hissed, the name carrying weight beyond the single word. The massive figure turned at the sound of their arrival, his small eyes widening with recognition and delight as he spotted Yamato. Well, he bellowed, voice carrying easily over the chaos. If it isn't the young master's wayward offspring. How delightful. His gaze shifted to Naruto. And you must be the dimensional intruder I've heard so much about. Hawkins was most descriptive. Naruto stepped forward, putting himself slightly ahead of Yamato. You must be Queen. I'd say it's a pleasure, but I try not to lie unnecessarily. Queen threw back his head and laughed, a booming sound devoid of genuine humor. Oh, I like this one. So much more interesting than the usual dour samurai we get to crush. He flexed his mechanical arm, which transformed into what appeared to be a weapon of some kind. Kaido will. I'll be most pleased when I deliver both of you to him. That's not going to happen, Naruto replied, creating a dozen shadow clones that immediately moved to assist Kiku and the other resistance fighters. Queen's eyes widened with interest at the display. Fascinating. Not a devil fruit ability, is it? Something else entirely. His grin turned predatory. I'm going to enjoy taking you apart to see how you work. The battle exploded into chaotic violence. Queen proved to be surprisingly fast despite his massive size, his modified body granting him strength and capabilities beyond normal human limits. He targeted Yamato specifically, clearly under orders to capture rather than kill. Naruto fought to keep between them, his clones engaging the other beast pirates while he focused on the immediate threat. Inside, he felt Kurama stirring, responding to the danger. Need some help, Kit? Wouldn't mind it, Naruto responded mentally as he narrowly avoided a crushing blow from Queen's mechanical arm. Kurama's chakra flowed through him, not the full cloak of his most powerful form, but enough to enhance his speed, strength, and reflexes. A faint golden aura surrounded him, his eyes shifting to crimson, pupils elongating to slits. Queen paused, genuine surprise registering on his face. Now that's interesting. Your energy signature just changed completely. His eyes narrowed in calculation. Some kind of transformation ability. Not zone type. Naruto didn't waste breath explaining. He launched himself forward with newfound speed, landing a devastating kick to Queen's chest that actually pushed the massive man back several steps. Nearby, Yamato had fully engaged her devil fruit abilities, wooden constructs erupting from the ground to entangle beast pirates and create defensive barriers for the injured resistance fighters. Her movements were fluid and precise, each action serving multiple purposes in the chaotic battlefield. For a moment, it seemed they might gain the upper hand. Hen Queen's mechanical arm reconfigured again, revealing what appeared to be a launching mechanism of some kind. Enough playing around, he announced with malicious cheer. Let me demonstrate why they call me Queen the Plague. Something shot from his arm. Small, needle-like projectiles that scattered across the battlefield. Wherever they struck, beast pirates quickly cleared away, clearly FAML. IAR with whatever weapon their commander had deployed. Virus rounds. Yamato shouted in warning. Don't let them touch you. One of the resistance fighters wasn't fast enough. A projectile grazed his arm. And the effect was immediate and horrifying. His skin began to discolor and bubble, spreading outward from the point of contact as he collapsed with an agonized scream. Naruto reacted instinctively, Kurama's chakra flaring brighter as he created a swirling vortex of wind that caught the remaining projectiles and flung them harmlessly upward. We need to end this now, he called to Yamato. Explosives will detonate in less than 10 minutes. She nodded in understanding, moving to gather the surviving resistance fighters. Kiku supported her wounded comrade, expression grim beneath her composed exterior. Queen, however, wasn't finished. He charged forward, mechanical arm reconfigured into what appeared to be a blade of some kind, aimed directly at Yamato's exposed back. Watch out, Naruto shouted, throwing himself into the path of the attack. The blade sliced across his chest, cutting through clothing and flesh alike. Pain flared hot and immediate, but Kurama's chakra was already working to contain the damage. Prevent infection. Start the healing process. Yamato whirled at his cry, eyes widening in horror as she saw Naruto wounded. Her expression transformed in an instant, giving way to cold fury as wooden tendrils erupted from the ground with explosive force, wrapping around Queen's massive form and constricting with audible creaking. You will not touch him again, she said, voice deadly quiet. Queen struggled against the wooden prison, mechanical arm whirring as it tried to cut through the rapidly thickening restraints. Impressive, he grunted, strain evident in his voice. You've been practicing since you ran away from Daddy. Naruto staggered to his feet, one hand pressed against his bleeding chest. Yamato, we need to go. Now. She hesitated, clearly, torn between ensuring Queen's defeat and their escape. In that moment of indecision, the facility's wall exploded inward, showering them all with debris. Through the newly created breach strode another powerful figure, this one with a long-necked dinosaur head where a human head should be. X-Drake, Queen called out, still struggling in his wooden prison. Perfect timing. Catch these rebels before they escape. The dinosaur man assessed the situation with cold, reptilian eyes, then transformed, his body shifting from the hybrid form to fully human, revealing a tall, imposing man with a distinctive X-shaped scar on his chin. Queen, X-Drake acknowledged in a voice devoid of emotion. It appears you have the situation under control. Don't just stand there, Queen bellowed. The girl is Kaido's child. Don't let her escape. X-Drake moved forward, but instead of pursuing the resistance fighters, he struck Queen with a devastating blow to the temple that left the larger man stunned within his wooden restraints. What? Queen managed before consciousness fled. X-Drake turned to Yamato and Naruto, his expression unreadable. You have approximately 8 minutes before those explosives detonate. I suggest you use them wisely. When they stared in shocked confusion, he added, Go. Now. I'll ensure the workers evacuate safely. Yamato recovered first. Why are you helping us? I have my reasons. X-Drake replied cryptically. This conversation never happened. Naruto nodded in understanding. This man was clearly playing a dangerous double game. Thank you. They didn't waste the opportunity. Gathering the resistance fighters and fleeing through the breach X-Drake had created. Behind them, they could hear the dinosaur man bellowing orders to evacuate the facility, claiming the structure was compromised and unsafe. They had barely reached the tree line when the first explosions ripped through the weapons storage area, followed by secondary blasts as ammunition stockpiles caught fire. The night sky blazed orange and red, the factory transforming into an inferno that would destroy months of weapons production in a single night. We did it, Kiku breathed, supporting her injured comrade as they watched the destruction from a safe distance. Naruto nodded, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. But not without cost. Yamato turned to him, concern replacing the cold fury of battle. Let me see, she insisted, examining the slice across his chest. It's deep, but clean. We need to bind it before we move further. As she worked, tearing strips from her own clothing to create bandages. Naruto studied her face. That was some display back there. I didn't realize your wood abilities could be so aggressive. Something like embarrassment flickered across her features. I don't often lose control that way. But when I saw him hurt you. She trailed off, focusing on securing the bandage. Thank you, Naruto said simply. For having my back. Their eyes met briefly, something unspoken passing between them. Then Kiku approached, breaking the moment. We should move, she advised. They'll send search parties once they reorganize. Yamato nodded, helping Naruto to his feet. We'll take the eastern path through the marshlands. It's slower but harder to track. As they departed, leaving the burning facility behind, Naruto glanced back one last time. In the chaotic scene of evacuation, he thought he glimpsed X-Drake watching their retreat, a mysterious ally in the heart of enemy territory. Then smoke obscured his view, and they were moving into the darkness of Wano's wilderness. The journey back to the mountain hideout was arduous, made more difficult by their injuries and the need to avoid main routes where beast pirate search parties would be looking for them. What should have been a 2-day journey stretched into 4 as they navigated treacherous marshlands and dense forests. By the 3rd day, it became clear that they couldn't continue as a group. The resistance fighter injured by Queen's virus weapon was deteriorating despite their best efforts to treat him, and Kiku's companion needed medical attention beyond what they could provide in the field. We should split up, Yamato decided as they made camp in a sheltered ravine. Kiku, take Fumio and Hiro directly back to the hideout via the river route. They need Amatsuki's medicines. Kiku looked concerned. And you, Naruto and I will continue through the forest, Yamato replied. We'll draw any pursuit away from your path, then circle back once it's safe. The plan made strategic sense. Though Naruto suspected there was another reason Yamato wanted to separate, something in her expression had been troubled since the battle at the facility, beyond simple concern for their wounded. Once Kiku and the injured fighters had departed, Heading toward the river where they might find transportation, Yamato and Naruto continued their more circuitous route through Wano's northern forests. They traveled mostly in silence, each lost in their thoughts. Naruto's wound was healing faster than normal humans would, thanks to Kurama's influence, but it still pained him with each jarring step or sudden movement. As evening approached on their first day alone, Yamato led them to a small cave hidden behind a waterfall, another of the Resistance's emergency shelters, this one barely large enough for 2 people to rest comfortably. "We should stop here for the night," she said, checking the cave's interior for signs of recent use or disturbance. "There are supplies cached in the back." Naruto nodded gratefully, easing himself down against the cool stone wall. The day's journey had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. Yamato busied herself retrieving the hidden supplies, dried food, water, basic medical items, and building a small fire near the cave's entrance where the smoke would disperse in the waterfall's spray. As she worked, Naruto studied her, noting the tension in her movements. The furrow between her brows that hadn't eased since they'd left the burning facility. "What's bothering you?" he finally asked as she handed him a portion of dried fish and rice. "Beyond the obvious, I mean." Yamato paused, then settled across from him, the small fire between them casting flickering shadows across her face. "We were betrayed," she said simply. Naruto frowned. "What makes you think that?" "Think about it. The facility's defenses were exactly where our intelligence said they would be, but they were also clearly expecting some kind of attack. Hiku's team was discovered almost immediately, despite their skill at remaining hidden." She shook her head. "And Queen?" He spoke as if he knew someone unusual was involved in the resistance. "He called you, the dimensional intruder, specifically." The pieces clicked into place in Naruto's mind. "Someone told them we were coming." "Yes." Yamato's expression darkened. "Someone from within our group. It's the only explanation." The implication hung heavy between them. Someone they trusted had endangered them all, had nearly gotten them killed or captured. "Do you have any idea who it might be?" Naruto asked carefully. Yamato shook her head. "That's what troubles me most. We're so few now, each person vetted through years of struggle together. The idea that one of them could be working for Kaido." Her hands clenched into fists. "It feels like another violation of everything we're fighting for." Naruto understood her pain. Betrayal by a comrade cut deeper than any enemy's blade. "When we return to the hideout, we'll need to be careful about what information we share, watch for any unusual behavior." "If we return to the hideout," Yamato said quietly. "I've been considering whether that's wise." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "You think the traitor might have revealed that location too?" "It's possible." She stared into the fire. "And if Queen reports to Kaido about our encounter, confirms that I'm active, working with the resistance, he might decide a more aggressive approach is warranted." She looked up, meeting Naruto's gaze. "The others could be in danger simply by associating with me. You can't blame yourself for Kaido's actions." Naruto said firmly. "Can't I?" The question held years of conflicted emotions. "I chose to oppose him, knowing what he's capable of, knowing what my defiance means to him personally. It's not just politics for Kaido, it's family. It's pride." She laughed bitterly. The great emperor, unable to control his own child. How that must gall him. Naruto leaned forward, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his wound. "Listen to me. You are not responsible for the harm Kaido causes. That's on him. His choices, his cruelty." His voice softened. "Choosing to fight against injustice isn't something you should ever regret, even when it comes with consequences." Yamato held his gaze for a long moment, something vulnerable in her expression that she rarely allowed others to see. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm fighting for the right reasons. Am I opposing Kaido because it's what's best for Wano, or am I just rejecting everything he represents because of our personal conflict? Does it matter?" Naruto asked gently. "The result is the same. You're fighting to free people from tyranny." "Motivation always matters," she replied. "Odin fought for Wano because he loved his country and its people. Not because of personal grudges or ambition. That purity of purpose gave him strength even as he died in boiling oil." She looked down. "I want to be worthy of his example." Naruto considered her words carefully. "Where I come from, we have a saying. There are no perfect shinobi, only perfect intentions." Even the greatest heroes have complicated motivations. What matters is the choice they make when it counts. He shifted to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. For what it's worth, I've seen how you look at the people you're trying to protect. Tama, the villagers. Even the workers in that facility. That's not someone acting from spite or rebellion. That's someone who genuinely cares. The firelight caught the sheen of moisture in her eyes before she blinked it away. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing that in me. They sat in comfortable silence for a time, the gentle sound of the waterfall creating a peaceful backdrop to their sanctuary. Eventually, Yamato stirred, turning to examine the bandages on Naruto's chest. I should change these, she said, her voice returning to its practical tone. Naruto nodded, fully removing his tattered jacket and shirt. The wound beneath the bandages looked better than expected, angry and red, but already beginning to heal at the edges. Your recovery rate is remarkable, Yamato observed as she cleaned the wound with supplies from the emergency cache. Another benefit of your partnership. Kurama keeps me alive through just about anything, Naruto confirmed with a small smile. It's mutually beneficial. If I die, he'd have to reform, which apparently is a huge hassle. How cooperative of him, Yamato remarked dryly, a hint of humor returning to her eyes. As she worked, her fingers gentle against his skin, Naruto became acutely aware of their proximity, of the trust implied in this simple act of care. There was an intimacy to it that transcended the physical, a connection forming between them that had little to do with their shared struggle against Kaido and everything to do with mutual recognition of something kindred in each other. Earlier, at the facility, he said carefully, when Queen attacked me, you reacted, intensely. Her hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. I did. Why? She secured the fresh bandage before meeting his eyes. Because in that moment, I realized I couldn't bear to see you hurt. The admission seemed to surprise her as much as him. You've become important to me, Naruto. More quickly than I would have thought possible. The simple honesty of her words touched something deep within him. You've become important to me too, he replied softly. Neither moved for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Then Yamato drew back slightly, composing herself. We should rest, she said. We have a long journey tomorrow. Naruto nodded, understanding her need for space. Arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the small fire, though the confines of the cave meant they were still closer than they had been on previous nights of their journey. As the fire burned low and the sound of the waterfall lulled them toward sleep, Naruto found himself watching Yamato's face in the dying light, the strength in her features even in repose, the vulnerability she kept so carefully guarded from the world. In this quiet moment, away from the resistance, away from the burden of being Kaido's rebellious child, she seemed more fully herself than he had yet seen. You're falling for her, Kurama observed within his mind, his mental voice amused and resigned at once. Is that so surprising? Naruto responded silently. Not surprising, no. Complicated, yes. She belongs to this world, Kit. And eventually, we'll need to find our way back to ours. The reminder sobered Naruto's thoughts. If that's even possible, it is, Kurama confirmed. I can sense the dimensional energy more clearly now as I recover. Given time and the right circumstances, we could open a way back. Naruto watched the gentle rise and fall of Yamato's breathing across the dying embers. That's a problem for another day. Just be careful, the Nine-Tails cautioned, his gruff concern evident. Hearts are fragile things, even for those as resilient as you two. With that parting thought, Kurama's presence receded, leaving Naruto alone with his thoughts and the soft sound of Yamato's breathing mingling with the waterfall's constant rush. Morning came with a shock of cold as the fire had died completely overnight. Naruto woke to find Yamato already up, checking their supplies and preparing a small, cold breakfast from their rations. Sleep well, she asked, offering him a portion of dried fruit and what appeared to be some kind of jerky. Well enough, he replied, stretching carefully to test his wound. The pain had diminished significantly overnight, another benefit of accelerated healing. Better than expected, she admitted. This place has always felt secure, even when nowhere else does. She glanced toward the waterfall. I found it during my first months after escaping Kaido. It became something of a personal refuge. Naruto looked around with new appreciation, understanding the significance of her bringing him to this particular hideout. "Thank you for sharing it with me." She nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "We should reach the mountain pass by nightfall if we maintain a good pace. From there, it's another day to the hideout." They packed quickly and set out, Yamato leading them along nearly invisible game trails that wound through the dense northern forest. As they traveled, the awkwardness of the previous night's conversation faded, replaced by a comfortable companionship. By midday, they had covered significant ground, the terrain gradually changing as they ascended toward the mountain pass. The forest thinned, giving way to rocky slopes dotted with hardy pines and flowering shrubs that clung tenaciously to the nutrient-poor soil. "Beautiful country," Naruto observed as they paused to rest and eat. From their elevated position, they could see for miles. Across Wano's northern region, forests and rivers, small villages nestled in valleys, and in the far distance, the ocean glinting like polished steel. "It was even more beautiful before Kaido," Yamato said, following his gaze. "The rivers ran clear, the forests were preserved by tradition and respect, and those villages were prosperous instead of fearful." She pointed to a distant smudge of smoke on the horizon. "That's coming from Amagasa village. It was known for its paper making, traditional scrolls and books that were prized throughout Wano. And now it produces wrappings for Kaido's weapons and packaging for the chemicals his factories use." Her voice held controlled anger. "The craftsmen who once created art now create tools of death." Before Naruto could respond, movement in the valley below caught his eye. A large group traveling the main road, their procession marked by the distinctive banners of the Beast Pirates. "Yamato," he said quietly, gesturing toward the distant column. She followed his gaze, her expression sharpening. "That's a punitive expedition," she said, voice tight. "Too many troops for a simple patrol or tax collection." Naruto studied the distant forces, wishing he had Hinata's Byakugan to see details at this range. "They're heading toward that village you mentioned, Amagasa." "Yes." Yamato's face had gone pale. "We should continue our journey. The mountain pass. They're going to punish that village, aren't they?" Naruto interrupted. "Because of what we did at the weapons facility." Yamato didn't answer immediately, her conflict visible. "It's what Kaido does," she finally said. "When he can't find those directly responsible, he makes an example of those nearby. It's effective at discouraging resistance. We can't let that happen," Naruto said, already rising to his feet. "Naruto." Yamato's voice was strained. "There are at least 30 beast pirates in that column, possibly more. Just the two of us, still recovering from our Saint battle. We can't take them all on directly. So we don't fight them directly," Naruto replied, mind already racing through possibilities. "We create a distraction, draw them away from the village. They won't all follow a distraction. Some will remain to carry out their orders. Then we make sure the villagers are evacuated before they arrive." Naruto met her troubled gaze. "We can't just continue on our way knowing what's about to happen, Yamato. Not if there's any chance we can prevent it." She closed her eyes briefly, conflict clear on her features. "This isn't the mission. The strategic choice would be to return to the hideout, report what we've seen, plan a proper response. Sometimes strategy has to yield to what's right," Naruto said quietly. Yamato looked at him for a long moment. Then down at the distant village where unsuspecting people went about their day, unaware of the approaching danger. "What would Odin do?" she murmured, almost to herself. Her eyes, when they returned to Naruto's, had cleared. Decision made. "We'll need to move fast," she said, already repacking their supplies. "The beast pirates will reach Amagasa by late afternoon." Relief and admiration flooded through Naruto. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she replied grimly. This could easily become a suicide mission. Despite her words, there was new purpose in her movements, a rightness that hadn't been there before. "But you're correct. This is what we're fighting for. Not abstract victories, but real people in real villages." They descended toward Amagasa by the most direct route, abandoning the careful path they'd been following in favor of speed. As they traveled, they formulated a plan, simple by necessity, flexible by design. "I'll create shadow clones to evacuate the villagers," Naruto explained as they ran transformed to look like ordinary citizens to avoid suspicion. We need to get them into the northern forest before the beast pirates arrive. I'll create a barricade across the main road, Yamato added. Something to slow their approach. Then position myself to direct the evacuees to a safe location. She glanced at him. The beast pirates will know resistance fighters were involved. It will confirm their suspicions about the region. Better suspicion than massacre, Naruto replied grimly. They reached the outskirts of Amagasa with barely 2 hours to spare before the punitive expedition would arrive. The village was larger than it had appeared from a distance, several hundred people living in traditional homes arranged around a central square. The promised factory dominated one end of the settlement, smoke rising from its chimneys as workers labored inside. How do we warn them without causing panic? Naruto asked as they observed from the edge of the forest. We don't, Yamato replied, her expression resolute as she removed her mask. I do. Before Naruto could question her, she strode directly into the village, her bearing and presence immediately drawing attention. Villagers stopped their activities, staring with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as this stranger walked purposefully toward the village center. Naruto followed at a distance, creating transformed shadow clones that dispersed throughout the village, ready to assist with evacuation once Yamato had made their case. In the central square, Yamato stopped, waiting as people gathered cautiously around her. An elderly man, apparently the village headman, approached with visible trepidation. Who are you? He asked, voice quavering slightly. What business do you have in Amagasa? My name is Yamato, she replied, her voice carrying clearly to all gathered. I come with urgent warning. Beast pirates approach from the south, a punitive expedition. They will reach your village within 2 hours. Murmurs of fear rippled through the crowd. The headman's face paled. What have we done to draw their wrath? We have paid our taxes, met our quotas. The attack on the coastal weapons facility. Yamato explained. They cannot find those responsible, so they will make an example of the nearest settlement. She looked around at the frightened faces. You must evacuate immediately. Take only what you can carry. Leave everything else. Head north into the forest. Disbelief and fear warred in the expressions around her. Leave our homes. Everything we've built. One woman cried. Where would we go? Better homeless than dead, Yamato replied bluntly. I have seen what Kaido's punitive expeditions do. None will be spared. Not the elderly, not children. Still, hesitation gripped the crowd. Years under Kaido's rule had taught them obedience, not resistance. The thought of fleeing rather than accepting punishment was foreign to their conditioned minds. Seeing their reluctance, Yamato made a decision. She extended her arm, transforming it visibly into the wooden form of her devil fruit power. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I am fighting against Kaido's tyranny, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. I am offering you a chance to survive, to join those who believe Wano deserves freedom. But we must act now. The demonstration of her power, clear, not something an ordinary citizen would possess, finally convinced the villagers of the seriousness of her warning. The headman turned to his people. Gather your families, he ordered, his voice steadying with purpose. Take food, medicines, warm clothing, anything you cannot carry, hide if possible. We leave in 30 minutes. Organized chaos erupted as the village mobilized. Naruto's transfo, RMED clones integrated seamlessly into the evacuation effort, helping the elderly and children, carrying supplies, guiding groups toward the predetermined gathering point at the northern edge of the settlement. Yamato joined Naruto as he coordinated the effort. They're responding better than I expected, she observed. People are stronger than they know when properly motivated, Naruto replied. How long until the beast pirates arrive? Quote, less than an hour now. She looked back toward the southern approach. I should establish the barricade. Can you handle the rest of the evacuation? Naruto nodded, creating another batch of shadow clones to assist. We'll be ready. Just give us as much time as you can. Yamato departed toward the southern road, determination in every line of her body. Yuto turned his attention back to the evacuation, impressed by the villagers' resilience once they'd committed to action. Despite years of oppression designed to break their spirit, they worked together efficiently, helping neighbors, ensuring no one was left behind. The evacuation was nearly complete when one of Naruto's shadow clones dispersed, sending a rush of alarming information back to him. Beast pirates had arrived earlier than expected and were already engaging Yamato at the barricade she'd created across the southern approach. "We need to move faster," Naruto called to the village headman. "They're already here." The remaining villagers hurried, fear giving wings to their feet. Naruto created more shadow clones to cover their retreat into the forest while he himself raced toward the southern edge of the village. Toward Yamato, he found her engaged in combat with the advanced scouts of the beast pirate force, a half-dozen fighters led by a headliner with the partial transformation of some kind of predatory cat. Her wooden constructs had indeed blocked the road, forcing the pirates to either dismantle it or fight their way through her defenses. "Thought you could use some help," Naruto called as he joined her, immediately engaging two beast pirates who had circled around her wooden barrier. "They arrived early," Yamato replied, sweat beading on her forehead from the exertion of maintaining multiple wooden constructs while fighting. "The main force is right behind these scouts." Even as she spoke, more beast pirates appeared on the road, at least 20 fighters armed with swords, clubs, and the firearms they'd failed to destroy at the facility. At their head rode a figure Naruto hadn't seen before, a woman with a serene expression that contrasted sharply with the cruel gleam in her eyes. Black Maria, Yamato identified her, voice tight. One of Kaido's Tobi Roppo, elite fighters just below the All-Stars like Queen. The elegant woman halted her forces with a raised hand, surveying the wooden barricade and the two defenders with mild interest. My, she called, her voice musical despite the menace beneath it. "What have we here?" Rebels intercepting a lawful expedition of the beast pirates. Her gaze focused on Yamato, recognition dawning. Could it be the young master's wayward daughter, in the flesh? "The village is empty," Yamato replied, ignoring the identification. "There's no one left for you to punish. Leave now, and we'll let you depart unharmed." Black Maria's laughter was like wind chimes, beautiful and chilling at once. "Such bravado, as if you two could stand against all of us." She smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. "Besides, empty buildings burn just as well as occupied ones. The message will be sent, regardless. We won't let you destroy their homes," Naruto declared, stepping forward. Multiple shadow clones appeared around him, each in fighting stance. Black Maria's eyes widened slightly at the display. "Ah, you must be the dimensional stranger Queen mentioned. How fascinating." She drew a long pipe from within her robes, tapping it thoughtfully against her palm. "Kaido will be most interested in meeting you both. Take them," she commanded her forces. "Alive if possible, but don't risk yourselves unduly." The beast pirates surged forward, weapons raised. Naruto and Yamato stood their ground, back as the enemy closed in from all sides. "Any chance of reinforcements?" Naruto asked, kunai at the ready. "None," Yamato replied grimly. "We're on our own. Then we make it count," Naruto said, feeling Kurama's chakra respond to his need. The golden aura flared around him, stronger than before, fueled by his determination to protect the escaping villagers. "Ready, always," Yamato answered, wooden tendrils erupting from the ground around them. The battle exploded into chaotic violence. Naruto's shadow clones engaged the regular beast pirates while he focused on the stronger headliners. Yamato's wooden constructs created a shifting battlefield, raising barriers and launching attacks that kept their opponents off balance. Black Maria observed for a time, then sighed as if disappointed by the spectacle. "Enough playing," she called, stepping forward herself. Her body began to change, transforming partially into something with too many legs and razor-sharp mandibles, a spider-human hybrid of disturbing proportions. "Ancient zone type," Yamato explained quickly as they regrouped. "She's exponentially more dangerous in this form." "I'll handle her," Naruto said, chakra swirling in his palm as he formed a Rasengan. "You keep the others occupied." Before Yamato could protest, he launched himself toward Black Maria, the spiraling sphere of energy aimed at her transformed midsection. The Tobi Roppo moved with surprising agility for her size, barely avoiding the direct hit. The Rasengan grazed her side, tearing through the exoskeleton with a crack that made her hiss in pain. "Impertinent boy," she snarled. Her musical voice distorted in her hybrid form. "You'll regret that." She spat something from her mouth, a web-like substance that expanded rapidly as it flew toward him. Naruto dodged, but the edge of the substance caught his arm, adhering with incredible strength and burning where it touched his skin. Careful, Yamato called out, engaged with 3 headliners simultaneously. Her webs contain a paralytic toxin. Naruto felt the truth of the warning as numbness began to spread from the point of contact. He created more shadow clones to keep Black Maria occupied while he tore away the webbing. Kurama's chakra already working to neutralize the toxin. The battle intensified as more beast pirates joined the fray. For every one Naruto's clones disabled, 2 more seemed to take their place. Yamato fought with increasing desperation, her wooden constructs becoming more creative but also less refined as her stamina began to wane. "We can't hold them much longer," she called, her voice strained. "The villagers should be deep enough into the forest by now. We should retreat while we can." Naruto knew she was right, but disengaging from this many opponents wouldn't be simple. He needed something to create distance, to buy them time to escape. "Kurama, I need more power," he communicated internally. "Take what you need, Kit," the Nine-Tails responded. "Just don't exhaust yourself completely. We'll need energy to escape afterward." Naruto centered himself, drawing deeper on the Nine-Tails chakra than he had since arriving in Wano. The golden aura around him intensified, taking on more defined shape, not the complete tailed beast mode he could access at full strength, but enough to manifest the beginning of the chakra cloak, complete with flickering energy ears and a single tail. The transformation caught the attention of every beast pirate on the battlefield, including Black Maria, whose compound eyes widened at the sight. "What manner of devil fruit is that?" she wondered aloud, momentarily hesitating in her attack. "Not a devil fruit," Naruto replied, voice deepened by Kurama's influence. "Something much older." He brought his hands together, focusing the enhanced chakra. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. The technique formed in his palm, smaller than his normal version but still devastatingly powerful. He hurled it not at the beast pirates themselves, but at the ground between the 2 forces, calculating the impact precisely. The Rasenshuriken detonated with concussive force, sending earth, debris, and dust exploding upward in a blinding cloud. E-shock wave knocked many of the beast pirates off their feet, creating momentary confusion in their ranks. "Now," Naruto called to Yamato, grabbing her arm as she disengaged from her opponents. They sprinted toward the forest edge, using the chaos and dust cloud as cover. Behind them, Black Maria's voice rose in fury, ordering her forces to pursue once they recovered. As they reached the tree line, Yamato used her devil fruit power one last time, creating a dense wall of intertwined branches to slow their pursuers further. Then they were running through the forest, following the trail left by the evacuating villagers. They caught up with the rear of the evacuation column about 2 miles into the forest, the slowest group, primarily elderly villagers and families with small children. Naruto immediately created fresh shadow clones to help them move faster, while he and Yamato took positions at the rear, alert for pursuit. "We've bought some time," Yamato said, breathing hard from exertion. "But they'll follow our trail eventually." Naruto nodded grimly. "We need to get these people to safety first, then worry about losing our pursuers." They continued through the dense forest until Ght fall made further travel dangerous for the civilians. Finding a defensible clearing, they established a temporary camp, Yamato creating wooden shelters while Naruto's clones gathered firewood and distributed the limited supplies the villagers had managed to bring. The village headman approached them as they finished organizing the camp's perimeter. "You saved our lives today," he said, bowing deeply. "Amagasa owes you a debt we cannot repay." "Your safety is enough," Yamato replied. "But I must warn you, you cannot return to your village. The beast pirates will watch it, waiting for anyone who comes back." The old man nodded sadly. "I suspected as much. What are we to do now? Winter approaches, and we have nowhere to go." Yamato and Naruto exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "There are others like us," Yamato finally said. "People fighting against Kaido, with safe havens established. We can guide you there." Hope kindled in the headman's eyes. "The resistance. We have heard whispers, but never dared to believe. It exists," Naruto confirmed. "Small but growing, and now stronger with the addition of your people, if you choose to join." The headman straightened, new purpose in his bearing. When one has lost everything but life itself, the choice becomes clear. We will join your resistance, fight for Wano's freedom in whatever way we can. After tea, Headman departed to share this development with his people. Yamato turned to Naruto, her expression troubled. We can't take them all to the mountain hideout, she said quietly. Not only would the journey be too difficult for many, but if there truly is a traitor among us, we can't risk leading the beast pirates directly to your main base. Naruto finished the thought. We need an alternative. Yamato was silent for a moment, considering options. There's another location, she finally said. A secondary sanctuary we established but never fully utilized, an abandoned temple complex in the eastern mountains. It's smaller, more primitive, but defensible and well hidden. Can we reach it safely with this many civilians? It won't be easy, she admitted. But possible, especially with your shadow clones to assist. The greatest challenge will be evading beast pirate patrols along the way. Naruto nodded, decision made. Then that's where we'll go. We'll send word to Hidetsu about tea. Change of plans once the villagers are safely established. As night deepened around their camp, Naruto and Yamato took turns standing watch, alert for any sign of pursuit. During one quiet period, with most of the refugees asleep and only the soft crackle of dying fires breaking the silence, Yamato joined Naruto at his lookout position on a large boulder overlooking the darkened forest. You were right, she said without preamble. About helping the village. Naruto glanced at her, noting the resolved expression that had replaced her earlier conflict. It was the right thing to do. Yes, she gazed out at the sleeping refugees. For years I've been fighting against Kaido in the abstract, gathering information, building networks, preparing for some future confrontation. But today, she paused, searching for words. Today I fought directly for these people, these lives. It felt different, more real. That's what it always comes down to in the end, Naruto replied softly. Not grand strategies or political ideals, but people, protecting those who can't protect themselves. Yamato turned to study his profile in the moonlight. You've done this before, led civilians from danger, protected the vulnerable. Many times, he confirmed. It's the core of what being a shinobi means to me, using power to protect, not dominate. In that way, you're very much like Odin, she observed. He believed strength carried responsibility, that the strong should protect the weak, not exploit them. A small smile touched her lips. I think he would have liked you. Coming from Yamato, Naruto understood this was perhaps the highest compliment she could offer. I wish I could have met him, he replied simply. They sat in companionable silence for a time, the stars of this unfamiliar world wheeling overhead. The peace of the moment stood in stark contrast to the day's violence, a reminder of what they were fighting to preserve. Earlier today, when you faced Black Maria, Yamato said eventually. That golden energy around you, it was different from before. Stronger, more defined. Naruto nodded. Kurama's power. As we both recover, I can access more of it. He flexed his hand. Ain't golden glow momentarily illuminating his skin. Still not at full capacity, but getting there. It's beautiful, Yamato said, surprising him. Powerful, certainly, but also, warm somehow. Like sunlight given form. The observation touched him. Few had ever described the Nine Tails chakra as beautiful before. Most saw only the destructive potential, the fearsome power. Kurama appreciates the compliment, Naruto said with a small smile. Though he'd never admit it. Yamato hesitated, then asked, what is he like? As a person. The question reflected a genuine desire to understand, not mere curiosity about his abilities. Naruto considered how to explain the complex being he shared his existence with. He's ancient, for one thing, has seen civilizations rise and fall, witnessed the best and worst of humanity countless times over. Naruto gazed up at the stars. That's given him a perspective that's sometimes cynical, sometimes surprisingly wise. He's proud, stubborn, doesn't suffer fools gladly. A fond smile crossed his face. But he's also loyal to those who earn his respect, protective in his own gruff way. It took us years to move from adversaries to reluctant allies to true partners, but now, I trust him completely. It sounds like a profound bond, Yamato observed quietly. It is, Naruto agreed. Different from human relationships, but no less real. He turned to face her directly. Speaking of bonds, thank you for trusting me today. With the decision to help the village, with leading these people to safety. You earned that trust, she replied simply. Not just with words but with actions. Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of connection that transcended their relatively brief acquaintance. Naruto found himself studying the in details of her face in the moonlight, the strength in her jawline, the determination in her eyes, the rare gentleness in her expression that she revealed to so few. Without conscious thought, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face where the night breeze had displaced it. The simple contact lingered, his fingers barely touching her cheek. Yamato went still at the touch, but didn't pull away. Her eyes met his, a question in their depths that neither was quite ready to voice. We should get some rest, she finally said, her voice softer than usual. Tomorrow will be challenging. Naruto nodded, letting his hand fall away. I'll finish this watch. You sleep. She stood, hesitating for a moment as if there was more she wanted to say. Instead, she simply touched his shoulder. Briefly, a gesture of connection that spoke volumes in its restraint, before making her way back to the camp. Naruto watched her go, aware that something fundamental had changed between them. Whatever happened next, with the refugees, with Kaido, with the resistance, they would face it together, bound by something that had grown from mutual respect into a connection neither had anticipated. Careful, Kit, Kurama rumbled within him. Though without his usual cynicism. This world isn't ours. Eventually, we must return. I know, Naruto responded silently. But right now, this is where we are. These people need us. She needs us. The Nine Tails was quiet for a moment. Just be prepared for difficult choices ahead, he finally said, uncharacteristic gentleness in his mental voice. Naruto turned his gaze back to the darkened forest, alert for any sign of pursuit. Whatever choices lay ahead, he would face them as he always had, with determination, compassion, and the conviction that protecting those who needed protection was always the right path, no matter how complicated the journey became. Dawn broke over the refugee camp with streaks of crimson and gold painting the sky, beautiful, but ominous too. Those familiar with weather signs in Wano's northern region. Storm coming, the village headman observed as he joined Naruto near the camp's edge. A bad one, by the look of those clouds. Naruto nodded, having noticed the same signs. How long do you think we have? Half a day, perhaps less, the old man replied. The autumn typhoons move quickly once they decide to strike. This complicated their already difficult situation. Moving 300 civilians through unfamiliar forest would be challenging enough. Doing so in the face of an approaching storm and with beast pirates potentially in pursuit made it nearly impossible. Yamato approached, having completed a perimeter check with several shadow clones Naruto had assigned to assist her. No sign of pursuit yet, she reported. But they're coming. I found fresh tracks about a mile south, at least 20 fighters following our trail. And now a storm approaching, Naruto added, gesturing toward the horizon. Yamato's expression HTENED as she assessed the weather signs. The temple sanctuary is still 2 days' journey at civilian pace. She shook her head. We won't reach it before the storm hits, and these people can't travel in a typhoon. Then we need shelter closer, Naruto concluded. Somewhere defensible that can accommodate everyone. The headman cleared his throat. There are caves in these mountains, he offered. Ancient limestone formations. Traders used them for shelter during the rainy season when I was young, before Kaido restricted civilian movement between provinces. Do you know their location? Yamato asked, hope kindling in her eyes. Generally, the old man replied. They lie to the northeast, perhaps half a day's journey from here. Naruto created a shadow clone. Guide him to scout the caves, he instructed the clone, who nodded and departed with the headman to gather more specific directions. As the camp stirred to life around them, Naruto and Yamato organized the refugees into groups, each led by a villager familiar with forest travel and supported by a shadow clone. The weakest and most vulnerable were placed in the center of the formation, with stronger individuals at the perimeter. We need to move quickly but quietly, Yamato instructed the group leaders. If we're spotted by beast pirate scouts, our advantage of numbers becomes meaningless. They departed as the sun cleared the eastern mountains. leaving the campsite carefully erased of signs that might make tracking easier. The day grew increasingly oppressive as they traveled, humidity rising and the sky darkening with the approaching storm front. By midday, the shadow clone Naruto had sent to scout the caves returned with welcome news. The limestone formations existed as the headman remembered, large enough to shelter everyone and naturally defensible with only a few access points. The closest entrance is about 2 hours ahead at our current pace, the clone reported before dispersing itself, transferring the knowledge directly to Naruto. We need to move faster, Yamato said, eyeing the rapidly darkening sky. The storm is accelerating. As if in answer to her concern, the first rumble of thunder rolled across the mountains, followed by a gust of wind that bent the treetops and sent leaves swirling around the refugee column. We won't all make it in time, Naruto realized, looking at the elderly and children who were already struggling to maintain the pace. He turned to Yamato. Take half the group, the fastest, and push ahead to secure the caves. I'll follow with the others, moving as quickly as we can. She hesitated, clearly reluctant to separate. And if the beast pirates catch up to your group, then I'll handle them, Naruto replied with quiet confidence. My shadow clones can buy enough time for everyone to reach safety. After a moment's consideration, Yamato nodded. Be careful, she said, touching his arm briefly, a gesture that had become their unspoken signal of concern and connection. We'll have the caves prepared when you arrive. The column split as planned, Yamato leading the faster group ahead while Naruto remained with those who needed more time. The wind continued to strengthen, and the first fat raindrops began to fall as they pushed onward through increasingly difficult conditions. An hour into their separated journey, one of the shadow clones Naruto had positioned as rear guard dispersed itself, sending an urgent warning. Beast pirates had found their trail and were closing rapidly, less than a mile behind them now. We need to hurry, Naruto told the group leaders, creating more shadow clones to assist the slowest refugees. They've found us. Panic threatened to spread through the group at this news, but the village headman stepped forward, his aged voice carrying surprising strength. Steady now. We are the people of Amagasa, craftsmen and artists who survived Kaido's oppression for years. We will not falter with freedom so close at hand. His words steadied the group, fear giving way to determined purpose as they increased their pace despite the deteriorating weather. Rain fell more heavily now, turning the forest floor treacherous with mud and hidden obstacles. Naruto dropped to the rear of the column, preparing to intercept their pursuers. He created 20 shadow clones, as many as he could maintain while still preserving chakra for the inevitable confrontation, and dispersed them in a wide perimeter around the refugee column. The storm broke in earnest just as the first beast pirates appeared through the curtain of rain, a dozen fighters led by one of the cat-like headliners they had encountered at the